This is Dina. Welcome to the Den. I am not above eating my words when necessary. A few years ago, I made a very bold statement, and I'm afraid I'm gonna have to admit that I was wrong.
Seriously, is there any horror movie villain who is more of a badass than Freddy?
Yes, there is. I've been watching the Hellraiser movies, and Freddy, we've had some great times together, and you will always hold a special place in my heart, but my soul belongs to Pinhead now.
What?
In all seriousness, I really do think I have found a new horror icon, although I do reserve the right to change my mind again.
I am the way.
Pinhead has done the seemingly impossible and surpassed Freddy, at least in my mind. During the slasher film craze of the 80s, when they were mixing in a lot of camp with horror, a very dark little movie called Hellraiser came out of nowhere and made a very legitimate and, at least for its time, a very effective attempt at straight dark horror, undiluted with hardly any comedy or lightheartedness. Hellraiser is serious fucking business. The movie is centered on the Cotton family. The first we see is Frank, who recently acquired this puzzle box. Later on in the series, you're going to learn about where it came from and who made it, but for now, all we know is that it opens a gate to some kind of hell dimension. Guy with the hooks! The Hellraiser movies are mostly pretty tame in the graphic depictions of torture department, but I kinda have a problem with the hooks through the skin. That never fails to make me squirm. Even in the really early scenes like this, where it's clearly a sheet of latex, still gets to me. Speaking of which, here's a fun fact about me in regards to this movie. I originally discovered it around the time I was just getting into horror movies. I thought, hey, this Hellraiser movie is really popular, let's give it a shot. So I watched it with my mom, and after the scene with the hooks, then the pillars with the body parts hanging off, then the hand rummaging through the bloody bits of flesh and finally piecing together a face like a puzzle, we were totally disgusted, and we turned it off right about there. Needless to say, I am glad I watched it again a year or two later and gave it another chance. But back to the Cottons. Frank has a brother named Larry who has a wife, Julia. Their marriage is not so great. In fact, this movie actually does a great job of showing that in lots of subtle ways. Usually in just how there are so many awkward silences, moments of tension, and shit. Sometimes they just look at each other as if they're thinking, God, is this really what I'm stuck with? My favorite is this scene at a dinner party where Julia decides to turn in early and she lets both male guests kiss her on the cheek, but when she gets to Larry, she kind of goes, meh, and walks off. And Larry doesn't look surprised at all. There's also this scene.
You got any beer?
There's some in the fridge.
Oh well, why don't I get it? I got nothing better to do.
To Larry's credit, he wants to make it work, but Julia's really just along for the ride. I should point out that Larry is played by Andrew Robinson, who is probably best known for playing Garak on Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
How thoughtless of me not to consider the effects the destruction of my home world would have on your business. These must be trying times for you. Be brave.
What is it about horror movie actors ending up on Star Trek shows and vice versa? He also played a rather eccentric side character in Child's Play 3, which is another horror series I love.
A haircut ain't regulation, soldier. When's the last time you had a trim, huh?
This is it?
Speaking of Larry, he is a big dork.
The old homestead.
Make myself some coffee.
It's a great idea. There's the kitchen.
He is always trying to be clever and failing at it.
Does it still hurt?
What? Oh, only when I drink.
Personally, I kind of love him and I think he's adorable, but Julia doesn't seem to agree. As for Julia, she suffers from bored housewife syndrome. I think she was blissfully ignorant of her own feelings until Frank showed up on her doorstep about a week before the wedding, and one thing led to another. There's definitely a stark contrast between the adorkable Larry and the ruggedly handsome hedonist Frank. Much as I hate to admit it with what a scumbag he is, Frank is pretty hot, so it's easy to see the attraction, especially from someone like Julia who feels stuck in a boring marriage. Anyway, sometime after Frank's little incident with the puzzle box, it was considerate of the Cenobites to clean up after themselves, by the way, Larry and Julia move into that same house, which was owned by Larry and Frank's parents, having not seen Frank since the wedding. As Larry is trying to get a mattress upstairs, and of course his character takes another hit as we see that he's really squeamish about blood.
I'm gonna faint.
You're not going to faint.
Shit.
He loses quite a lot of it on the floor of the room where Frank died, which is also a room where Julia is spending a lot of time these days. Larry is taken to the hospital and... one of the most awesome sequences I had ever seen in a horror movie takes place. This scene totally blew me away. When I first saw this, I was kind of dense about the fact that this was the same room where Frank died and the blood is causing him to rematerialize. I had no idea what this thing was. It wasn't until the brain was connected to the spinal cord that I realized that it was a human, and then I made the connection. But this is beautifully shot. Well, as beautiful as something like this could be. It's easy to figure out how it's done. All this stuff was probably sculpted in wax and they filmed it being melted and then played it backwards at high speed, but it's still really effective. So after the dinner party of sadness, Julia goes back up to the room and, this happens.
Julia?
Tell me who you are.
Frank.
Frank explains that the blood brought him back and that he needs more and he needs Julia to help him. Meanwhile, somehow I managed to get this far without mentioning that Larry has a daughter from a previous marriage, Kirsty. She doesn't like Julia very much. Anyway, Kirsty is leaving the dinner party of sadness with a guy named Steve who she's hitting it off with really well, and she discovers a vagrant watching her. Later that night, Kirsty has a weird-ass dream, which I'm sure symbolizes something, but I'm not sure what. This movie tends to allude to sex a lot, which I'll get more into later, but I just couldn't quite wrap my head around what this dream is supposed to mean other than maybe a really vague premonition.
I just wanted to make sure you were okay.
Especially since she feels the need to check on her dad afterwards. The next day, it begins. Julia starts actively finding victims for Frank. She takes a guy home and lures him upstairs, which is painfully weird and awkward for her. Plus she has to incapacitate him since Frank is too weak to do it. And the only available weapon is a hammer. Yeah, it's neither quick nor pretty. Julia isn't looking so good afterwards either. Frank, however, looks a little more developed. He's able to stand now and there's more meat on him.
Come here. Come to Daddy.
Ew, no thanks. Of course, Larry comes home and Julia has just enough time to ditch the body and hide in the bathroom. Actually, I love this line.
You want a cookie, little girl?
It's just kind of out of nowhere, and it's crazy how much it sounds like Tim Curry as Pennywise the Clown.
Don't you want a balloon?
Which didn't come out until 3 years later.
I'm feeling sick.
Sick is definitely the word for you, Julia. Oh, and here's some fridge horror for you.
I'm hurting.
Yeah, he's excited about it because it means he's getting better, but he's walking around without skin, and he can feel that he's walking around without skin. Anyway, Frank needs more victims, and the Cenobites are mentioned for the first time.
Here before they start to follow. Oh, the Cenobites. It's only a matter of time before they find I've slipped them. Then we can be together the way we were before. We belong to each other now. Like love. Only real.
Ew, Julia, don't. Gross. I don't want to know what that tasted like. Nice jump scare movie. So apparently Kirsty works at a pet store where the creepy vagrant shows up again.
Give those back.
Crickets.
Careful.
Meanwhile, Julia claims a second victim for Frank. It's clearly getting easy for her, and we're watching Julia's gradual descent into madness.
I can taste that.
Frank is getting pretty close to being healed. At this point, he explains to Julia what happened to him.
It opens doors. Doors to the pleasures of heaven or hell. I didn't care which. The Cenobites gave me an experience beyond the limits. Pain and pleasure.
Fun fact, the actor who played Frank actually got dizzy while filming the scene where he was hung upside down and he threw up, which is why he looks so miserable. Naturally, they still used it since it was so effective. Hooks in the flesh. I I feel the need to point out that this is 47 minutes into the movie and Pinhead still hasn't spoken. The worst part is that no matter how much he begged, they wouldn't stop that goddamn music box. So I think at this point Frank has already decided that he's going to kill Larry, but Julia isn't so far gone that she wants that to happen. Despite everything, she doesn't want Larry to die. So while Frank is trying to lure Larry upstairs, Julia is trying to keep him away from there. It turns out that Frank had left the room, but no one sees the rats nailed to the wall. Cue awkward love scene. Poor Larry, he's even bad in bed. Frank is looking like he's gonna kill Larry, but fortunately he backs off.
I don't understand you.
I cannot explain why Larry is so slow to react to Julia screaming her head off and his eventual reaction to it. In the book, yes, this movie is based on a book, Larry was really drunk. In the movie, he isn't, so I guess he's just really clueless on top of everything else, or he has a one-track mind. I don't know, it's weird.
Would you?
Uh-oh.
Anyway, the next day, Larry is telling Kirsty about Julia's weird behavior and asks her to talk to Julia.
Sure.
Meanwhile, Julia's bringing home victim number 3. Yeah, this will end well. I don't know how she doesn't see Kirsty there. I guess Kirsty is further away than it seems. She's still in a field, though. Whatever. So it's hammer time once again, and Kirsty ventures into the house and upstairs to see what's going on.
Kirsty, it's Frank. It's Uncle Frank.
No.
You know, it's never specified or anything, but I get the distinct impression that there's a bad history between these two.
You've grown. You're beautiful.
Don't touch me.
Something about how the first words out of her mouth upon realizing who she's talking to is "don't touch me." Granted, he's all gross looking and she just saw him kill a guy, but I just get the feeling that there's more to it than that, especially considering some of the comments from Frank.
And he's so proud, don't you? Beautiful. No! Give me that.
No.
I love how she says that, like a little kid who just learned what that word means. No!
Give me the box!
You want it? Fucking have it!
In case you didn't notice, Kirsty is fucking awesome. So Kirsty passes out, wakes up in a hospital, and this is where things start to get symbolic, which I'll get to in a minute.
What about this? Ringing the bells? You are hanging on to it like grim death.
I don't remember.
So Kirsty is left alone in the room with the box. And the way she plays with it is kind of suggestive. Also, there's a TV in the room that shows a flower opening up on a loop. A blossoming flower is commonly symbolic of a girl hitting puberty. It's always a bad sign when the box takes that shape. She explores the hallway she opened up. A screaming baby is heard like in her nightmare. I'm still not sure what that symbolizes. Babies are a result of sex, maybe? I don't know. Oops, and all of a sudden she's not alone. Run, Kirsty! Run from the phallus monster! Actually, I think his design is pretty cool, and it looks pretty good considering that this movie is fairly low budget. Also, it's referred to in the Hellraiser wiki as the Engineer. Now, in the book, the Engineer was a particular Cenobite whose job it was to assign punishments. If that's what this thing does, she definitely needs to get the hell away. Uh-oh, that can't be good. A little over an hour into the movie and the Cenobites are finally here. Let's see. Chatterer. Pinhead. Butterball. And female. Fun fact about female Cenobite. Her name in the credits was going to be Deep Throat, but I guess it wasn't allowed for some reason. Which is kind of silly considering some of the other material in this movie, but whatever. I am hereby calling her that from now on. She needs a descriptive name, just like the others, and not just be identified by her gender. Girl power and all that. Pinhead finally gets some dialogue.
The box. You opened it. We came.
And I love how simple and straightforward he is.
Who are you?
Explorers in the further regions of experience. Demons to some, angels to others.
He's not evil, he's not especially enjoying this, he just has a job to do.
You solved the box. We came. Now you must come with us. Taste our pleasures.
Just for fun, I'm gonna do a running tally of how many times Pinhead says the words suffer and flesh in this series.
Go away, leave me alone.
Oh, no tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering.
Wait! You've done this before, right? To a man called Frank Cotton.
Oh, yes.
He escaped you.
Nobody escapes us.
Kirsty makes a deal with the Cenobites.
Supposing he had escaped us. What has that to do with you?
I can lead you to him, and you can take him back instead of me.
I love that, by the way. Can you imagine if Nancy had said to Freddy, hey, take my drunk-ass mother instead of me, since she's the one who actually had a hand in killing you, and Freddy went,
Okay, bitch.
Like I said, Kirsty is awesome.
I want to hear him confess himself. Then, maybe... But if you need us, we'll tear your soul apart.
This is only the beginning of how she will do whatever it takes to survive, and anyone who has to be sacrificed in the process is SOL. I mean, not so much here because Frank is clearly a scumbag and definitely deserves hell more than Kirsty, but, well, I will eventually get to my point in a later video. I just wanted to send up a flag here signifying that this is where it starts. Meanwhile, Larry comes home and Julia says she needs to show him something.
What is it?
That can't be good. I am ending part 1 here because the shit is about to really hit the fan. So if you haven't seen Hellraiser yet, here's your chance to check it out before the major spoilers happen. See you in part 2. A little later, Frank apparently has skin again. You can't see his face, but with the band-aid on the hand in the previous scene, it's not too hard to figure out that he's wearing Larry's skin.
Daddy, you're okay. You're really alright.
Kirsty shows up, and I get that Frank might not do a perfect job of attaching the skin, but the makeup department did a little too good a job showing that. These are not normal injuries. There is literally skin hanging from along his hairline. How does Kirsty not seem to notice this? Oh well.
He's trying to kill you. He's gonna kill you.
Wait. Whatever Frank did was unspeakable. It's unspeakable.
I have to say that I love Andrew Robinson as Frank. He plays Larry just fine, but he really shines as an evil character. I'm sorry, but I think Andrew Robinson plays a better Frank than the guy who played Frank in the rest of the movie. No offense toward that guy, but Andrew Robinson just really knocks that performance out of the park.
Baby, like a mad dog. I had to put him out of his misery.
Seriously, Kirsty, there is skin hanging like halfway down his forehead. Get a fucking clue. Anyway, Kirsty doesn't believe what she's hearing and demands to see Frank's body. Considering that she's made a deal with the Cenobites that she'd get them Frank in exchange for her, she's understandably upset that he might have been killed.
I need to see him.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
Show her.
Yep, that sure looks the way Frank looked earlier, with the lack of skin and all.
We want the man who did this.
No.
Either the Cenobites are onto what's going on, or they're mad that someone killed Frank before they could get him back. Not sure which. Either way, Kirsty is screwed.
Come to Daddy.
Oh my God.
Come to Daddy.
And Kirsty finally figures it out.
Frank!
Well, so much for the cat and mouse shit.
Not me!
Poor Julia, and she finally realizes just how much she means to Frank.
Nothing personal, babe.
Kirsty hides in the storage room where she discovers one of the victims from earlier. Ugh! Oh, and yes, they used real maggots for that scene, and poor Ashley Lawrence ended up with maggots inside of her shirt, sticking to her skin because of how sweaty she was. Double She somehow doesn't blow her cover, and Frank leaves the room. This is another one of those scenes I can't explain. Now would be a really good time to sneak out the front door. I totally understand the breakdown after all she's been through, but put it off for a couple minutes until you've gotten to safety. Then again, maybe she's giving up because she knows that if Frank doesn't get her, the Cenobites will.
Oh my god! Daddy.
Yep, that body's actually poor Larry.
No, don't mourn him. He was dead long before we ever touched him.
Bastard!
Frank's here.
Bastard!
Your dear old Uncle Frank.
Oops, that sounded a lot like a confession.
What the hell is that?
Oh, like you don't know. I get a kick out of that little shove. He's like, now what, tough guy?
Frank.
No. Set me up, bitch.
Kirsty's expression here cracks me up for some reason. Yeah, with the hooks again. Oh, more hooks. Wait for it.
Jesus wept.
Andrew Robinson actually came up with that line. The script had him saying, fuck you. Looks like the Cenobites are going back on their word. Also, either the wall is bleeding or that hook has a lot of blood on it. Considering what just happened to Frank, I'm guessing it's the latter. Okay, this is another scene that's kind of weird. Julia was on death's door last time we saw her, but somehow she managed to make it up the stairs and onto the bed, along with finding the puzzle box, and I'm not sure why she'd even do it. Maybe she had a similar idea as Kirsty and was trying to send the Cenobites after Frank before she died. Oh well, obviously it backfired. I have this running joke in my head that Pinhead sets his sights on Kirsty because he wants to hit that. It almost sounds like it with some of the dialogue. Either way, it's kind of looking like Deep Throat wants to hit that as well. Anyway, Kirsty pries the puzzle box out of Julia's cold, dead hands, and Pinhead always makes such a great entrance.
We have such sights to show you. No, don't do that.
Go to hell!
But Kirsty fiddles with the puzzle box and sends him back to hell. Aw, bye Pinhead. See you next movie. Next goes Deep Throat. Now the house is collapsing and Steve, who is looking for Kirsty, is finally caught up with her, though I honestly don't see the point of his role in this movie. He's just kind of thrown in. Nice entrance by the Chatterer. Kirsty gives him a few whacks with the puzzle box and then sends him back too.
Steve.
Then Steve shows up just in time to get in the way before falling debris collapses on Butterball. We don't see what happens to him after that, but I think we can assume he was sent back to hell after the other Cenobites, since Kirsty is seen fiddling with the puzzle box some more after that. Hell is still not done trying to claim Kirsty, as the engineer shows up again. Okay, that was too damn funny. Steve, just admit you're totally useless and leave the puzzle box solving to Kirsty. And after some wrestling, the engineer is sent back. Kirsty and Steve get out of the house just as it begins to burn. Bye, Frank. Kirsty chucks the puzzle box into some burning wreckage, but the so-called vagrant shows up again and, this happens.
What's your pleasure, sir?
The end. So that was Hellraiser, the brainchild of Clive Barker. Despite some flaws, like certain characters seeming weirdly clueless at times, or doing things that possibly don't make sense, I love this movie, I really do. Hellraiser is gothic horror at its best. The makeup effects are amazing, especially since it was relatively low budget. Not only are there the Cenobites, but about 3 different versions of Frank as he gradually regenerates. And of course we have the engineer who has this really unique design and method of locomotion. Yes, you can see the wheels behind him, get over it, it's still a cool design. There is one weird thing about this movie though that is kinda hard to overlook once you know about it. So this movie was filmed in the UK, obviously with British actors. Well, the studio made a marketing decision to try to make it seem more like it took place in America, so they dubbed about half the voices, including Frank and Steve. For one thing, it's kind of badly done with the 2 movers in the beginning.
That your daughter?
Uh-huh.
Got her mother's looks.
Her mother's dead.
Oh.
There's a bit of dialogue between Kirsty and Steve where it implies that he's British like Julia.
She's uptight and frigid.
I beg your pardon.
See, there you go. I beg your pardon.
Hey, we're not all frigid.
Despite him obviously not sounding like it. I'm also not overly fond of Frank's dubbed voice. I think he sounded better before.
Kirsty, it's Frank. It's Uncle Frank.
No.
You remember?
No.
Come to Daddy.
Kirsty, it's Frank. It's Uncle Frank.
No.
You remember? Come to Daddy.
And he didn't even sound British, so I don't know why they even dubbed him in the first place. But yeah, clearly this is not America, so not sure who they thought they were gonna fool. Anyway, I did read the book it was based on, The Hellbound Heart, partly because I just wanted to, but also in preparation for this video. The movie follows pretty much all of the events in the book pretty closely, and a lot of the dialogue, especially Pinhead's lines, is lifted from the book, word for word. Some noticeable differences are that Larry had a different name. He was called Rory in the book. Also, Kirsty was not Rory's daughter, but a friend who had a crush on him. Also, I'm sorry, but I really didn't like Kirsty in the book. It seemed like all she ever thought about was how much she loved Rory and how much prettier Julia was than her. And she just wasted a lot of time feeling sorry for herself. Pretty far cry from the adorable Spitfire she became in the movie, despite that she ends up doing most of the same things, like getting the puzzle box away from Frank and making a deal with the Cenobites. But with Frank not being her uncle, that creepy subtext is gone, and Larry's death in the movie had much more of a punch to it than Rory's death in the book because, well, he's Kirsty's dad and not just some friend she's carrying a torch for. Also, the scene with Frank's regeneration actually happened off-screen in both the book and the original script. It's like Clive Barker had no hope of it being within the budget, and originally it wasn't. New Line contributed extra funds to film the scene of Frank's rebirth, and it was filmed later. Obviously, there's also the title. The studio didn't want to go with the Hellbound Heart because it sounds too much like a romance. During a meeting about it, an older lady jokingly suggested that it be called What a Woman Will Do for a Good Fuck. And when you really boil it down, that pretty much is Julia's motivation. Another difference is that the Cenobites do keep their end of the deal in the book, so Kirsty having to send them back with a puzzle box doesn't happen. You can decide for yourself if that's good or bad. I know some people prefer that the Cenobites don't renege on the deal because it reinforces the idea that they are neither good nor evil but forces of nature. My guess is that the reason for the change in the movie is because it allows for more screen time for them, which I'm all for. It also adds more action, which a movie needs more than a book does, so I can see both sides of that argument. Also, Pinhead practically didn't exist, at least not as we know him. One Cenobite was described this way. Every inch of its head had been tattooed with an intricate grid, and at every intersection of horizontal and vertical axes, a jeweled pin driven through to the bone. Also, the Cenobites in the book are so deformed that their genders are ambiguous, but the Cenobite that Pinhead is modeled after is described as having a voice that was light and breathy, the voice of an excited girl. So, I guess the book's version of Pinhead was female? Can you imagine Pinhead talking that way? We have such sights to show you! Also, the Cenobites didn't really have a leader per se, and all of them spoke. From what I gather, the movie was going to be more like that, but since the actors playing Butterball and Chatterer obviously can't speak well in their makeup, all of the dialogue was given to Pinhead and Deep Throat, having to come across that Pinhead is the leader, whether it was intended or not. And naturally, Pinhead, being the lead Cenobite, continues throughout the series. Basically, the book is just fine on its own, but this is a rare case of the movie improving on the book. The book had some great ideas, but the writing of the book was more like planting a seed, which eventually grew into this awesome movie. blossomed, as it were. I don't know about you, but one of my favorite things about watching the Hellraiser movies for the first time is just checking out the new Cenobites and seeing what twisted new designs the makeup and costume departments have come up with. When it came down to designing the Cenobites, Clive Barker drew inspiration from punk fashion, Catholicism, and by visits he took to S&M clubs. Some descriptions he gave to the designers mentioned areas of revealed flesh where some kind of torture was or is occurring, something associated with butchery involved, repulsive glamour, and magnificent super butchers. Other than those general guidelines, each one is unique, so I'm going to break down each one going from my least to my most favorite. Other than being obese, Butterball's most distinguishing feature is that his eyelids are stitched shut, usually hidden by a pair of shades. Not sure how they stay on since he has no ears, but oh well. There's also a big vertical gash on his stomach held open with hooks. He also has a pretty impressive arsenal of weapons at his disposal. He normally just kind of hangs around in the back, doing his own thing, not really communicating with anybody. He's really just bloated and grotesque in general. Chatterer is arguably the coolest looking Cenobite, and the general design of his head shows up a lot in future Cenobites, so he's obviously popular. His face is mostly a mass of burned scar tissue. His features are so twisted and distorted he barely looks human, aside from those exposed teeth. His mouth is stretched and held open by 8 hooks with wires that wrap around the sides of his head to the back. His weapon of choice seems to be a very nasty-looking pair of large hooks. He also appears to be the muscle of the group, being the one to quickly subdue Kirsty so the others can have at her. He's also the first Cenobite to wear pants.
Not leaving us so soon, are you?
Deep Throat, aka the female Cenobite, is kind of tied with Chatterer as my favorite out of the original group after Pinhead. Her most distinguishing feature, aside from being the only female in this movie, is that there is a vertical incision on her neck held open by wires which exposes her trachea and kind of resembles a certain part of the female anatomy, which is not helped by this scene. Ew. It also results in her having a raspy voice, which is kind of cool, especially when she growls. Her favorite weapon seems to be either a hook or a serrated blade. And being all girl power, I like that the female in the group appears to be second in command.
But if you need...
Of course, that may only be because she's one of only 2 Cenobites who can talk, but still, I like that she has a presence.
Perhaps we prefer you.
She also has wires going through her cheeks and a nail through her nose. Also, just an interesting fact, in this movie, she's played by Clive Barker's cousin.
Go away and leave me alone.
Oh, no tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering.
Oh, Pinhead, where to start? Well, he's actually been around in Clive Barker's mind longer than the original story has, in some form or another. He went through a lot of incarnations before he became just right. Visually, he's an interesting mix of gore and gorder. Obviously, his most distinguishing feature is the grid line of cuts on his head with a thin nail driven into each intersection. Other than that, he wears a leather outfit with holes cut into it where we can see hooks piercing various strips of dangling flesh, along with another hook going through just about where his navel would be. His outfit also includes a floor-length skirt, which makes him look oddly like a priest. Other than that, Doug Bradley was really kind of cute under the makeup, and some of that shows through. There's an interesting contrast between those soft facial features and those sharp, straight metallic pins. Pinhead has an amazing presence that actually extends throughout the series. Even with the sequels that aren't that great, Doug Bradley manages to save them to some degree. While most of his competitors were either wisecracking like Freddy and Chucky or completely silent behind a mask like Jason and Michael Myers, Pinhead is a slightly more traditional, majestic, elegant villain, more like Dracula. For the most part, he's emotionless, but sometimes there's a hint of passion in his voice.
We have such sights to show you.
It's like he is a true believer of his own religion and very much wants to share it.
You solved the box. We came. Now you must come with us. Taste our pleasures.
In the sequels, we do learn his backstory, and he becomes a more prominent figure in the movies for a while.
I am pain.
But I'll get to that stuff when I get around to covering those movies. And I will eventually get to every one. Yes, even that one. Well, I think that's about all I have to say about Hellraiser for now. Go check it out if you have the stomach for it. That's it for now. See you next time. Freddy, we've had some great times together, and you will always hold a special place in my heart.
Oh, bitch.
Hey, this is Dina. Welcome to the Den. So recently I talked about Hellraiser. It was Clive Barker's baby. It was based on a book he wrote, The Hellbound Heart, and I don't think I mentioned this last time, but he actually wrote that book for the purpose of having a starting point for the movie. He was going to adapt that book and make that movie from the beginning, and he wrote the script and directed the first movie.
We'll tear your soul apart.
Well, Clive Barker was an executive producer on this one and had a little less involvement, but his influence is still pretty clear. And I've read that he generally liked how it turned out. This one was directed by Tony Randall? Oh god, the idea of Felix Unger being involved with anything as messy as a Hellraiser movie is so ironic. See, in 1970 there was a show called The Odd Couple and Tony Randall played... never mind. Actually, it's a different Tony Randall. He was one of the editors of the first movie and generally has a good feel for what works in a Hellraiser movie. The movie opens with a series of flashbacks recapping the first movie. Previously on Hellraiser.
Jesus wept.
Don't worry if this doesn't help you remember enough about the first movie. There's another set of flashbacks coming pretty soon, oddly enough.
We have such sights to show you.
So this movie opens similarly to the first, only it's a different time period, and this clearly isn't Frank Cotton. Although you are going to find out pretty quickly who it is. And a horror icon was born.
The suffering. The sweet suffering.
Back in the present time, shortly after the events of the first movie, Kirsty Cotton is getting psychiatric help and being questioned by a detective.
Steve.
Don't worry about him, he's okay. We sent him home hours ago. He had some story to tell.
Who the fuck are you?
Wait, so they apparently told the same story, but Steve got to go home while Kirsty is being kept under supervision? I guess they wanted to write Steve out of this movie for whatever reason, but seems like they could have come up with something better than that, like maybe he's in a different mental institution? Okay, maybe that's not much better, but still. Meanwhile, as the police are checking out the Cotton house, Kirsty gets worried because she overhears that they found the mattress that Julia died on. Considering that Frank was taken after messing with the puzzle box and he was brought back to life when blood dripped onto the place where he died, the same thing can happen with Julia.
And if we are honest...
Meanwhile, we get to meet Dr. Chenard, who, while doing brain surgery on a conscious patient, waxes poetically about how the human brain is like a labyrinth.
Others have been here before us and have left us signs, but we, as explorers of the mind, must devote our lives and energies to going further.
Yeah, Chenard is kind of an asshole.
My part in this is over. Tidy for me, will you?
Back to Kirsty, she's freaking out. It does kind of make sense. A whole lot happened really quickly in the first movie. I can see how she could end up having kind of a delayed reaction to it now that it's all over. Especially with how calm she seemed in the end.
And then they came.
Who came?
Cenobites. The demons.
By the way, I'm pretty sure no one ever referred to them as Cenobites in front of Kirsty, and that's not exactly a common term. The detective leaves her in Chenard's care, and she inadvertently says the wrong thing in front of him.
That mattress, you've got to destroy that mattress. See, Julia died on it, and she can come back now like Frank.
You'll find out later why that was a mistake. Later, Kirsty is woken up by noises and discovers Chekhov's gun, Tiffany.
She never speaks. All she does is solve puzzles.
Now, despite how picky I've been sounding up until this point, I do love this movie, but Tiffany is one aspect of it that I'm kind of meh on, but whatever. Oh, the guy Kirsty is talking to is Kyle. He's Dr. Chenard's assistant, but a lot more friendly. Honestly, I keep wanting to call Steve from the first movie Kyle. They're kind of interchangeable to me. So Kirsty tries to go back to sleep and ends up seeing this. As Tiffany finishes the puzzle that she was working on. Yay, symbolism. The next day, Dr. Chenard goes to work, and we see him take the elevator to the sub-basement. Yeah, this is going about where you would expect it to, and it's not pretty. Nice jump scare. Back in Kirsty's room, she indicates to Kyle what she saw.
I'll get Dr. Chenard. You take it easy. I'm sure he can help.
He got a ticket to hell?
And he don't care. Kyle goes to Chenard's office and overhears that he wants the mattress delivered to his house. So Chenard is keeping severely disturbed patients hidden in poor conditions, and he's interested in a spot where someone died. That can't be good.
Part I know about, part that destroyed my family, that must have started with my Uncle Frank.
So this is where we get to the real recap of the first movie. The main difference being that there's some footage we didn't see before. Frank's voice isn't dubbed over.
I'm brother Frank.
What else? Oh yeah, there's that. That scene looked a bit different in the first movie.
Weird.
Shortly after, Kyle breaks into Chenard's home. To be fair, some of this stuff you'd expect a doctor to own, like the anatomy poster. Those pictures of corpses in the background are iffy, though. And then there's the picture of the puzzle box on the wall, and oh, the fact that he has 3 lament configurations. 3.
Jesus Christ.
Chenard is the Seto Kaiba of Hellraiser. Speak of the devil, which is a very apropos saying right now, Chenard has gone back to the institution and retrieves one of the so-called patients from the sub-basement. Notice how thin this guy is? I should point out that he also played Skinless Frank in the first movie and the skinless figure that Kirsty saw earlier. Also, it's kind of weird that he thinks that bugs are crawling on him, yet he makes no effort to brush them off. An earlier script had him thinking that the bugs were under his skin, and that's why he couldn't just brush them off, and why Chenard handed him a straight razor so he could cut himself and get the bugs out. I don't know why they changed that, but I'd guess that they couldn't get the effect to look right. Unfortunately, with the way the scene ended up, it doesn't really make any sense and just comes across like they're trying to be as gross as possible just for the sake of it. I should also point out that I'm covering the extended cut, and this scene is a lot shorter in the original cut, which is currently on Netflix. In the uncut version, it goes on for an excruciating amount of time. The scene where Julia pursues him goes on for quite a while, too. Well, this is what you wanted, Chenard. Don't puss out now. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that no matter how obsessed he is with all things lament configuration, he wasn't quite ready for this. And it won't be the last time.
Don't be scared of me.
The next day, I like that look on his face when he sees all the blood on his nice clean walls and white carpet. It's also interesting how both Julia and Frank can function without skin. You'd have to have gone through some serious torture to be able to shrug off the absence of skin.
I'm cold. Well?
Yes. Yes. You look...
I think he wants to say hot, but I'm thinking oddly silly, all things considered. Sorry, Julia, but that is not a good look.
Well.
Well.
Well. Now she no longer looks silly, just weird, but that's kind of to be expected. But Julia feels sexier, and Chenard totally wants to hit that. Ew. But hey, be glad all they do is make out. The original script had her pushing him up against the wall and screwing him. I'm not even kidding. There she goes with that finger thing again. I didn't point it out in the last video, but this is just kind of a Julia thing. She did it with Frank twice, once when he had no skin. Ew again.
It's all true. Get dressed. I gotta get you out of here.
So Kyle goes back to Kirsty's room and tells her what he saw and that he believes her crazy story now. So Kirsty demands to leave so she can find a way to save her dad. Kyle can't bring himself to keep her from it, but he insists on at least coming with her.
Kyle, you don't have to do this.
I know.
Aww. So we get to see Julia feed on a body. Yeah, I'm gonna guess that they cast this woman purely because they liked her boobs. Wait, all this is happening in one night. Where did he find all those... Oh, I wonder if those are more patients from the sub-basement of the Institute. Yikes. And Julia not only has skin again, but perfectly manicured nails. Yay. So Chenard conveniently leaves before Kirsty and Kyle get there. Kyle leaves Kirsty with Chenard's collectibles while he goes to scope out the house. He runs into Julia, who he naturally doesn't recognize with skin on, and she plays it like she just stumbled in there and doesn't know what's going on.
Is it still here?
I don't know. Oh, you poor boy. You look awful. Come here.
The spider spinning his web for the unwary fly.
Yeah, this is normal behavior. I can kind of believe that Kyle might be in shock and not acting rationally, but he just comes across as not being very bright. Meanwhile, Kirsty is going through the pictures and comes across the one of the British gentleman in the World War II uniform. And she's probably wondering what it's doing among all this info relating to the puzzle box. Then she sees the next picture, and something clicks. I have more to say about this, but I think I'm going to save it for the end of the video.
Kyle?
Anyway, she hears a noise and quickly takes the picture with her as she goes to investigate.
Kirsty.
Uh-oh, showdown. And you're about to see why I friggin' love Julia in this movie.
They changed the rules of the fairy tale. I'm no longer just the wicked stepmother. Now I'm the evil queen. So come on. No! Take your best shot, Snow White.
That is quite possibly the most epic bitch slap I have ever seen.
Now it's my turn.
Channard returns with Tiffany, and we've just about reached the halfway point, so I'm going to end part 1 here. Seriously, if you haven't seen this movie yet, go watch it before I get to part 2. Just be warned that the gore is going to hit the roof later. Almost literally.
Now I'm...
Sorry, I just needed to see this one more time.
So come on. No! Take your best shot, Snow White.
Pound! Not that I don't still love Kirsty, but credit where it's due, Julia is badass. Anyway, Channard has returned with Tiffany, and as you can probably guess, he has her fiddling with one of those puzzle boxes.
You're sure this is what you want?
It's what I've always wanted.
So Tiffany unknowingly opens a gate to hell, and Bonnie and Clyde here slip into it unnoticed. Because screw the rules, he has money. Ah, here come the Cenobites. They look a little different, but I'll talk about that later. Ah, there's Pinhead.
Wait.
I love how the music swells so dramatically as he enters.
It is not hands that call us. It is desire.
So Pinhead is able to sense that the person opening the box in this case wasn't doing it out of some kind of dark desire like Frank or Proto-Pinhead. She was just trying to solve a puzzle just for the purpose of solving it because she's just obsessed with puzzles. I like that actually. It points out that the Cenobites have a specific purpose and they aren't evil just for the sake of it. It also causes some problems I have with the later sequels, but I'll cross those bridges as I come to them. Tiffany's like, okay, so that happened. Kirsty wakes up, not sure why Julia let her live, but whatever. Anyway, she finds that the gate to hell has been opened, so she goes through it as well.
Daddy? Daddy, where are you? Say something, I don't know where you are. Daddy, I'm coming.
Yeah, yell a lot, that's not a bad idea.
What's a bad idea?
Meanwhile, Tiffany has been lured in by carnival music, and we get the typical circus-themed horrors. They do look creepy, though. Then we get this Silent Hill-esque series of flashbacks about her past. Apparently Tiffany's mother brought her in and Channard had her killed in front of Tiffany, which is probably what triggered her to go all catatonic. Not sure what the carnival is for, though. Okay, as much as I really don't care about Tiffany that much, I have to say that I kind of like the idea that hell is like Silent Hill, where it makes you relive your traumatic past. Suddenly Kirsty is in her own hell. This is another scene that was originally cut. The blood and crying baby from the first movie returns, and the picture of Kirsty's mom is replaced with an image of Julia. Yeah, I wouldn't want Julia as a mom either.
Kirsty, we thought we'd lost you. How can it send us back, child? We're already here. And so are you.
Pinhead seems to have learned a new trick since last time. Or else maybe he only has his power when he's on his own turf. You smug bastard. I love you.
I didn't open the box!
Didn't open the box. And what was it last time? Didn't know what the box was.
Oh, Kirsty. So eager to play. So reluctant to admit it.
What is this? I don't even.
Perhaps you're teasing us. Are you teasing us?
I've come for my father!
But he is in his own hell, child, and quite unreachable.
I don't believe you!
But it's true, just as you are in yours.
And what about you?
We have no more surprises, but please, feel free. Explore. We have eternity to know your flesh.
So Kirsty runs through the labyrinth until she gets fed up with not finding anything and slams herself against the wall. But then a funny little talking blue worm shows up to give her some advice. Oh wait, wrong movie. Actually, it's just Tiffany. Back to Channard and Julia. I think Channard is more horrified than anything. He's already getting more than he bargained for. And this is so not even the beginning.
I have such sights to show you.
You better not let Pinhead hear you say that. But she does indeed have one hell of a sight to show him.
Oh, God.
This is mine. The god of flesh, hunger, and desire. My god. Leviathan.
I have to point out that those gongs you're hearing in the soundtrack, that's the word God in Morse code. We also get a little peek into the psyche of Dr. Channard. You know, as awful as he is, I almost feel sorry for him at this point. It's kind of a careful what you wish for sort of vibe.
Help me!
Why do you think I was allowed to come back?
Also, she screws him over big time.
It wanted souls. And I brought you. And you wanted to know. Now you know. Now everybody's happy.
This is another scene that got butchered in the original version. I honestly don't know which is worse, seeing an obviously edited scene that's a bit awkward as a result, or being subjected to some of this imagery. Yikes. So back to Kirsty and Tiffany, they come across the cotton house. Tiffany doesn't want to go in, so Kirsty tells her to wait outside.
But if I'm not back soon, real soon, I want you to get out, and I want you to get home.
So Kirsty goes inside and finds that it's a bit different than she remembers. Hey, it's Frank.
What's the matter, Kirsty? It's only Uncle Frank.
Oh no.
Didn't you get my message?
Oh, Daddy.
Oh, come on, Kirsty, grow up. When you're dead, you're fucking dead.
I love that line. I'm not even sure what it means. It's just amazing somehow. Yep, still creepy. By the way, there was originally a lot more to this scene. I'll talk about that afterwards.
This is my hell. They're here to tease me. That's why I sent for you, Kirsty.
I'd rather burn.
Yep, Kirsty is still awesome. I'm not really sure what the point is of having Frank lose his skin here other than a callback to the first movie. Either way, Julia crashes the party.
Family reunion?
Julia.
Frank.
I knew you'd come.
You knew?
You're a girl who always keeps her promises.
You can kind of tell where this is going to go just from Julia's expressions, so Frank's attempts to manipulate her here come across as just kind of pathetic.
Nothing personal, babe.
Speaking of callbacks, that was a good one.
There's nothing personal, babe.
Meanwhile, Channard steps out of the box that Julia had pushed him into as a newly made Cenobite.
To think, I hesitate.
Well, at least he's taking it well. Well, love him or hate him, Channard Cenobite has been born. Let the puns begin.
You never could hold on to anything for very long, could you, Kirsty?
Julia catches up with Kirsty and Tiffany, having found the puzzle box that Kirsty dropped when she fell earlier. For some reason, Tiffany tries to take her hand. It could be that she just wants the puzzle box. And so much for Julia, maybe. Afterwards, Kirsty and Tiffany have a moment. Tiffany appears to be starting to come around, which I have to admit does endear me to her a little. She was practically a prop up until this point. Okay, count the puzzle boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we know that there are at least 4. This is assuming that the 3 that Channard had on his desk are among these, and the 4th is from the first movie. But there could be as many as 8 in all.
The doctor, is he?
Of course, Tiffany's first words are something like that. I love how Kirsty looks at her like, dude, language, as if she's one to talk.
I recommend amputation.
I'm sure a lot of fans don't like Channard's Cenobite, but I find him pretty disturbing. I'll get more into it later, but it's partly this.
There's just something so unsettling about a deranged doctor. Something about all that knowledge of human anatomy being put in the wrong hands.
Ooh, that wasn't in the original cut. Uh-oh, the original Cenobites are here. That can't be good.
No boxes.
No more delays, Kirsty. No more teasing. Time to play.
Time to play.
Game over, man. It's game over.
Wait.
No more deals, Kirsty. It is your flesh we want to experience, not your skill at bargaining.
Just information.
Go on.
Oh, Pinhead, will you never stop letting Kirsty trick you? I'm telling you, he wants to hit that.
But trick us again, child. And your suffering will be legendary, even in hell. Or what is this? Someone else, do you think, escaped us? Like Frank?
No, this one didn't escape. And it's you.
Nonsense.
It's you!
So Kirsty does something unexpected. She tries to get them on her side by reminding them of their humanity.
Enough! Wait. I remember. I'm your doctor. I'm here to help.
I love the look on Pinhead's face. He's all, who the fuck is this tool?
Good. A fight.
Oh boy, Cenobite turf war. Here we go. I love that ability Pinhead has to summon hooks on chains just by thinking about it. His other Cenobites usually just carry weapons around. Well, that didn't work out so well. And now comes the scene that pissed off many a fan. The Cenobites get Worfed. The Worf effect is a bad habit of Star Trek The Next Generation, where they would show how tough a big bad was by having them attack the toughest member of the crew, which was supposed to be Lieutenant Worf. This can have a negative effect. In the case of Star Trek, it made Worf look weak because they overused it. In Hellraiser, it pissed off fans because a random newbie came in out of nowhere and just offed some established characters with barely any resistance. This is yet another thing I'm going to expand on later. Of course, Pinhead is the last, and it's kind of heartbreaking because, like I mentioned last time, kind of cute. I think his death takes a lot longer in the uncut version. Yikes. Well, obviously Kirsty and Tiffany get away, and Tiffany says something about how finishing a puzzle will make it all better. Back in the labyrinth, Tiffany retrieves the puzzle box.
What does it do? Oh my god.
Okay, what I think is going on here is when Pinhead rearranged the puzzle box so that Kirsty couldn't solve it, it caused the gates of hell to stay open until it could be changed back, and Tiffany is the only one good enough at puzzles to pull it off. But of course, Channard Cenobite has to come and screw everything up. He's why we can't have nice things. Oh damn, now he's gonna try to change her into a Cenobite.
I knew you'd come back.
Apparently Julia shows up and distracts Channard long enough for Tiffany to solve the puzzle. But he catches on and tries to get Tiffany, but his tentacles get stuck in the ground and, well, he's got that thing grabbing onto his head from above and... Damn, that was brutal. Okay, that wasn't Julia, but Kirsty. Remember what I said in the previous video about how Kirsty will go to insane lengths to survive? Well, she just wore someone else's skin and tongue-kissed a Cenobite. There you go. It's actually not the worst thing she's ever going to do, believe it or not. Again, you'll find out when I get there. So all the changes Tiffany just made to the puzzle box are now being made to Leviathan. I'm not sure how that works or why, but it looks awesome. Leviathan is not a happy camper. Later, the Channard Institute seems to be closed down, and Kirsty and Tiffany are on their way. Meanwhile, all the stuff in Channard's house is packed up except for that mattress.
Take a look at this.
Someone gets pulled in, another guy comes to investigate, and a pillar rises from the mattress with, Hellraiser stuff on it.
What is your pleasure, sir?
The end? Okay, before I move on to the next segment, I feel the need to explain what the hell happened here. The real reason the Cenobites got dwarfed is because Julia was supposed to become the big bad of this series, and killing off the Cenobites was to make way for that. Those are clearly her arms coming out of the bed as if she's feeding on this guy and being reborn again just as she was earlier. Well, what was supposed to happen was that Julia was to raise up from the mattress wearing a dress like the one she got from Channard, only black, and basically indicates that she's the Queen of Hell. They had started working on Hellraiser 2 before the first one had even come out, and they were unaware of how popular of a character Pinhead had become among the fans. When word got back to them on it during mid-filming, they decided to make the ending more ambiguous so it would be easier to bring back Pinhead in the next film. Okay, the end! So that was Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. It's not technically as good as the first movie, but it is so much fun. Some of the way the story plays out is a bit clunky, mostly due to last-minute changes to the script, but I feel that it more than makes up for it by how much it expands on this vast universe. The first movie was kind of on a smaller scale. It took place mostly in one house, and it was very focused on its characters and had some brilliant symbolism. The sequel started on a relatively small scale, but once the gate to hell is open, it's almost literally like Pandora's box. Rather than having Cenobites come and go and that's it, we follow them back into their world, and it is huge and fantastic. I love that there's a god in the middle who is essentially a huge geometric shape that shoots beams of black light. It's both simple and complex somehow. The movie feels a little more like mainstream horror in that it has bigger budget and we get a wisecracking villain and there isn't as much in the way of symbolism, but I feel that for the most part it still retains the heart of the first movie. No pun intended. It's a bit like what Aliens was to Alien, generally more straightforward, a bit more mainstream, maybe not as good story and character-wise, but a lot bigger and a lot more fun. Even the soundtrack is more epic. And it's hard picking a favorite between the two because, as different as the sequel is to the original, they really complement each other. So pretty much all the characters from Hellraiser returned in Hellbound, except that you might notice a severe lack of Andrew Robinson, which is too bad because I loved him in the first movie. While the original script was written before he declined the role, it's unclear why he did that, whether it was a disagreement over payment or a clash in schedules. Unfortunately, this is one of the reasons the script comes off as clunky. There's all this talk of Larry and he never shows up except in flashbacks. Originally, he was to show up in this scene attached to Frank by the arm. They were going to duke it out, Larry was going to use a knife to separate them, and then he was to escape hell with Kirsty and Tiffany. Oh, and he was going to punch out Channard's Cenobite at one point. So yeah, I think Larry was going to take a level in badass. I would like to have seen that, especially after how much Andrew Robinson grew on me in the first movie. But yeah, instead we have Pinhead confirming that Larry is in hell, and
But he is in his own hell, child, and quite unreachable.
Kirsty coming back empty-handed. which makes her whole journey through hell kind of moot. Even she seems to forget about that plot point after a while.
Goodbye, Doctor.
But on the upside, I do like what they did with Julia. In the first movie, she started off kind of a sympathetic character. Yeah, she's not a nice person or anything, but she's clearly being manipulated by Frank, and it doesn't end well for her. We get to watch her descent into madness and how it changes her. The sequel picks up after she has spent some time in hell, and she is just flat out evil now. In fact, there's a great quote from Claire Higgins, the actress who played her, on her IMDb page. I hope you understand Julia's reasons for being an unpleasant character, because you see the depths she's prepared to plumb for love. She's a great deal nastier this time, and if anybody sympathizes with her, I'm doing something wrong. I really want everybody to hate me. Also, another reason for redoing the ending of Hellbound was because Claire Higgins was ready to move on from horror movies after this one and didn't want to be in any more sequels. She's also taken a level in badass. I guess she's immortal now and has super strength or something, which makes me think that even though she looks human, she's basically become a demon, which lends a bit more credibility to where they were going to go with the ending. Also, I just think she looks better. As I'm sure you can tell, I've got a lot of nostalgia for the 80s, even down to some of the fashion and hairstyles. I love big chunky earrings, but helmet hair is something that I do not miss. Julia still looks 80s in this movie, but in a good way, not in a bad way. She's got that beautiful but dangerous thing down to a T, and her quote about graduating from the wicked stepmother to the evil queen is just perfect.
Now everybody's happy.
Now on to the Cenobites. Well, all of the Cenobites from the first movie returned. Aside from Pinhead, all of their roles are diminished. Rather than having Chatterer be the muscle, Deep Throat possibly second in command, and with only Butterball just hanging out in the background, they pretty much all just hang out in the background, despite Deep Throat having a couple of minor lines. But they mostly weren't as memorable as her dialogue in the first movie. Pretty much all of them look different though, which is mostly what I'm going to focus on. Butterball looks about the same, only his teeth have been sharpened. Kind of a nice touch actually, makes him look more dangerous and more grotesque somehow. When each of the Cenobites dies, they turn back into their former human selves. In Butterball's case, he apparently started off as an obese man. Clive Barker was quoted as saying it was due to their vices that they became Cenobites in the first place, and obesity tends to be linked with gluttony, symbolically anyway, so he was a hedonist in his own way. Chatterer? Wow, I'm sorry, but he looked so much better in the first movie. The actor who played him complained about not being able to see in the original makeup, and I understand that, but the new design just does not look good. Actually, it looks okay at first, and then it changes for the worse. At which point, for some reason, he looks less like his lips are being forced apart and more like he has a permanent snarl. This is because there was yet another deleted scene where the Chatterer was getting a makeover that involved the scar tissue being removed from his eyes. So when we first see him, his eyes are almost non-existent, then when he shows up sometime later, suddenly he has eyes, causing a continuity error. In any case, when he's killed, we see that as a human, he was a young boy. That always gets a reaction out of me that's kind of hard to describe. I wish we knew more about what happened to him, but maybe it's better if we don't.
Didn't open the box. And what was it last time? Didn't know what the box was.
Deep Throat, aka female Cenobite, not only had a makeover, but she is played by a different actress entirely. The original was played by Grace Kirby. This is pretty much the only image of her out of makeup that exists on the internet, since she decided to quit acting and become a school teacher and has distanced herself from her role in Hellraiser. Anyway, this new version was played by Barbie Wilde. Again, I like the original better. It's actually got nothing to do with the actress. Her look is a bit different, mainly just in little details, which doesn't bother me too much, but her voice is different. Instead of raspy sounding, it has kind of a weird vibrating quality to it that's hard to describe.
No more delays, Kirsty. No more teasing. Time to play.
Not leaving us so soon, are you?
I miss the raspy voice. I thought it was a neat detail with her having her throat cut open.
Perhaps we prefer you.
And due to her lack of dialogue and reduced role, she has less of a presence. Either way, I love this line.
Perhaps you're teasing us. Are you teasing us?
She basically just said to Kirsty, "Oh, you big tease, you know you want it," because she still wants to hit that. There was a deleted scene where she and Pinhead were to show up as doctors before revealing themselves. I can see why it was cut out. It looks a bit silly. When she's killed, it's revealed that she was a woman. Duh. I think we're supposed to feel bad because she was so pretty. For what it's worth, she is given a backstory, I think in one of the graphic novels, where she was originally a nun called Sister Nicoletta.
So sweet of you to come back.
You're sure this is what you want?
It's what I've always wanted. I have to see. I have to know.
I will talk about Channard Cenobite, of course, but I want to talk about Dr. Channard first. He is the sort of doctor who makes people afraid to see a doctor. Despite being a good doctor in the sense of knowing his way around human anatomy, he's rather cold at first. He treats this woman like a practice dummy. I'm sure he isn't harming her, but I'm sure that having any kind of surgery performed on you, especially while you're awake, is scary as hell. And normally a doctor will talk to the patient and make sure they aren't too stressed out or afraid. I mean, I've had dentists do that while fixing a cavity. I think it's very telling that one of the first things we see when Leviathan shines the black light on him is a boy dissecting an animal. With how much blood there is, I'm gonna guess that it was alive during part of it. Kids who do stuff like that usually grow up to be serial killers. I think he became a doctor not to help people, but so he could dissect them. It also could be that he also likes puzzles and he sees his patients as big puzzles that he can solve. So yeah, his dark side is not hard to see, and his becoming obsessed with some hell dimension that he read about, especially one that contains a labyrinth, which is, again, kind of like a puzzle, is not much of a stretch. Of course he ends up over his head, but he realizes it too late. We actually get to witness his becoming a Cenobite, so there isn't much about Channard Cenobite's general appearance that really needs to be pointed out. At one point early on, he pulls a neat trick where snake-like tentacles come out of his hands and form various objects. This is obviously stop-motion animation, and I'm sure it looks cheesy to people, but I kinda have a soft spot for this effect. When it's done reasonably well, it still has kind of a jerky quality to it, which has kind of an uncanny valley effect to me. It looks just unrealistic enough that it's unsettling. It's actually one of the reasons I really enjoy the original Clash of the Titans, and why the monsters in that movie freaked me out so badly when I was a kid.
The doctor. Is he?
Oh, and there's also the puns.
I'm taking over this operation.
Which is something I've heard fans complain about.
What was today's agenda? Ah, yes. Evisceration.
I know this kind of thing was overused by Freddy and similar villains in the 80s, but I think if the villain is threatening enough, it can work, and I feel that Channard Cenobite has the chops to pull it off. I find his voice and laugh terrifying.
I recommend amputation.
It has a weird, almost synthetic quality to it. It might have to do with whatever was happening to Channard's mouth and throat during the conversion, but having him come across as that threatening and inhuman, I think adding a twisted sense of humor adds to the horror rather than detracting from it.
Your case is closed, Tiffany.
I will admit that he does overdo it after a certain point.
I'm afraid it's terminal.
As for that scene where he kills off the other Cenobites, some fans have speculated that it had to do with them being weakened and disoriented by learning they were once human. This has been supported by screenwriter Peter Atkins. You can decide for yourself if that justifies it or not. Personally, I think it makes sense, and even if their deaths are quick, aside from pinheads, they are at least dramatic and appear to have meaning. By the way, the name for that trope is Worf had the flu. In the earlier script, he had a different name, Malahide. It was later changed to Channard, which is derived from Christian Bernard, who performed the world's first successful heart transplant.
Wait.
Pinhead. His appearance didn't change much in any way that I've noticed. Character-wise, he emotes more. Maybe it borders on too much.
I've come for my father!
He does seem a little too happy and smug when he meets Kirsty.
Oh, Kirsty.
I'm probably nitpicking a little since I really liked how emotionless he came off in the first movie. However, this movie treats him a bit differently than the first did. In the first movie, he was one of 4 Cenobites. He still is, technically, but here he seems to be treated with extra respect by the creators. Keep in mind that while a lot of this movie was being planned and filmed, they didn't realize that Pinhead had become popular among the fans. But Clive Barker and Doug Bradley both loved the character, so I think that was showing through. I don't think they're showcasing him for the fans. I think they did it because they thought they were going to kill him off permanently and they wanted him to go out with a bang. Speaking of which, this was the first movie to hint at Pinhead's origin. Hellraiser 3 will expand on that. As much as I love this opening scene, I like how it starts off sort of mimicking the beginning of the first movie with Frank, only to reveal that this character is much more than some random guy who decided to play with a box. I wonder if maybe they should have left it out. What if we discovered who this guy was at the same time Kirsty did? What if they just dropped the clues with seeing the image of Captain Spencer among the images relating to the lament configuration, and then the image of the head with the grid lines on it, and then we see Kirsty look back at the first image again, giving us a second look. I wonder if we would have made that connection. Maybe that scene from the beginning could have been used at the point where Pinhead is looking at the picture and remembering.
Remember.
I'm not necessarily saying that would have been a better way to handle it, just throwing it out there as a possible alternate way of telling that story. Speaking of that scene, I love that once Pinhead is turned human, he doesn't speak, yet he's able to convey a lot. That look he exchanges with Kirsty, even though the script doesn't make it totally clear what it's supposed to mean, other than it's clearly a clue for her and Tiffany to get away, I like to think of it as, humans, unite! And here's something I never really caught before this time. He picks up his weapon. I think even he knows he's not going to get to use it. He knows he's gonna die, but by God, he is going to die with a weapon in his hand. Worf would approve. Aw, bye Pinhead. See you next movie. Well, I guess that's all I have to say about Hellbound Hellraiser 2. It basically combines some of the best elements from the first movie with some more mainstream horror elements, and the end result is a nice amalgam in my opinion. We also get a nice look at the world the Cenobites come from, and I hope you liked it because we're never going to get to see anything like that again in this franchise outside comic books. Yeah, it's pretty much all downhill from here. How steep of a decline it takes depends on who you ask, and you'll find out for yourself as we go along. That's it for now. See you next time.
So come on. No! Take your best shot, Snow White.
Hey, this is Dina. Welcome to the Den. Well, here we are at part 3 of the Hellraiser franchise. Behind the scenes, a lot happened between Hellraiser 2 and Hellraiser 3. Some of it was unused ideas, but most of it boring legal stuff that basically meant that Clive Barker's own studio lost the rights to the franchise, and it was now owned by Miramax, who several years after Hellraiser 2 decided they wanted another Hellraiser movie. And they weren't including Clive Barker. And then they were, then they weren't again. In the end, he got a producer credit with no creative control until post-production. Meanwhile, Hellraiser 3 was the first Hellraiser movie to be made in the US instead of the UK, and it shows because this is the point where it just goes full-on mainstream horror. Whether or not that's completely a bad thing, we'll get to that. The movie opens up on this poser. Anyway, his name is JP, and he ends up buying what is apparently the pillar from the end of Hellraiser 2 from this creepy guy.
Take pleasure in it.
Meanwhile, a reporter named Joey is wrapping up a news story that she wasn't too crazy about having to report on.
Very bored. No story, no life. Really, really pissed off.
If she looks familiar, it's because she was played by Terry Farrell, who, like Andrew Robinson, was also on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So a story breaks out somewhere else, but there's already a reporter there.
But hurry, Doc. A real story with a real reporter.
Lighten up. The story of your life could be right around the corner.
Is the story of my life.
So all her crew leaves before she does, and now she's in Silent Hill.
You gotta be shitting me. Let's go.
Anyway, they wheel in a guy with chains hanging off of him, and I guess we're supposed to think that this is what happens to the physical body while the soul is in hell, but why are the chains there? And I don't think the Hellraiser universe works that way anyway, since everyone in the first movie just thought Frank had disappeared. And there was no mention of Julia's body being found in Hellraiser 2. Seriously, why are these chains not connected to anything instead of coming out of a puzzle box? I think we're supposed to shrug this off as being some mystical thing that we aren't meant to understand, but that just really bugs me. I like how they show the flatlining afterwards, so we wouldn't wonder if he survived his head exploding.
Your technique, it's all wrong.
Anyway, cue the scene about how she wants to be a serious reporter, but no one takes her seriously because she's a woman or whatever.
Hardly any thought.
Sometime later, she goes to the nightclub where the girl from the hospital said the guy was injured. And she totally doesn't stick out like a sore thumb here.
Excuse me.
So it turns out this nightclub was owned by JP, the guy who bought the pillar in the beginning.
I don't think I'm your type. You see, I'm out of grade school.
Gee, maybe the reason people don't take you seriously as a reporter is because you're so quick to give up. A guy doesn't give you the answer you want right away and you immediately leave in a huff. Later that night, she's having a nightmare about her father being killed in Vietnam, and is woken up by a phone call from the girl in the beginning who apparently caught wind that Joey was looking for her. Her name is Terry, by the way, which I like to imagine creating amusing confusion on set. So Terry doesn't have a place to stay, so Joey offers to let her stay with her in exchange for telling her what happened to the guy in the beginning. So Terry asks about the dream, and...
It's my father.
Oh, right. What did he used to...
No.
Yeah, she's kind of an idiot. I have to admit that she does grow on me pretty quick, though.
Just, I don't dream. Never have. No, it's just, it's really neat for me to hear about dreams. I'm jealous.
She's kind of quirky.
Hey, this is great, isn't it? I mean, just, two girls talking, having a conversation. Good coffee.
Terry, something awful happened to that boy, and I have to know what it was. Chains. Where did the chains come from?
It's weird, but there are a couple shots in this movie that look like they were made with 3D in mind.
Said it came out of this.
Back in the Boiler Room Club, JP notices the puzzle box-shaped hole in the pillar and hears sounds coming from it. So naturally, he blindly sticks his hand in there. Jesus, is that a rat or a really tiny bulldog? So anyway, kind of like how Larry's hand injury in the first movie got blood on the floor, which started Frank's resurrection, JP's blood gets on the pillar, which absorbs it in a similar way, and I think we know where this is going. The next morning, Terry mentions that the puzzle box came from a store, the one from the beginning, so they go down there to check it out, and of course it's been closed for a long time. However, it's not empty, so they at least didn't go the cliche bit where it's been abandoned for years. They break in and do some digging and find out that the pillar came from the Channard Institute, though the mattress was in Channard's home in the previous movie.
Hey, Joey. Check it out.
Back at the boiler room, JP singles out this particular blonde chick.
You're JP Monroe, right?
That's right.
And this is your club?
Right again.
Great club.
And good lord, she's a bad actor. Not that he's much better.
Don't put yourself down. If you have a quality, you should be proud of that.
Anyway, they end up banging. I'll be honest, a big reason why JP rubs me the wrong way is because he feels like an ex-B of Frank. Kind of the general look of him, along with how he's into dark stuff and he's a hedonist. But what made Frank interesting is that he took his shit seriously and he traveled the world looking for something to scratch that itch. The opening scene in the first movie where he's buying the puzzle box takes place in Morocco, not to mention that he's dangerous and has an actual edge to him. Meanwhile, JP is this little rich brat who can just buy whatever he wants, is apparently happy with just banging tons of women, and he just feels like a pale imitation who is trying to be edgy with his silly bangs and cowboy boots. Also, he thinks his own climax is so epic. I just can't leave this alone.
I'm just not interested.
Oh. Like I'm not an interesting person?
Now get dressed and get out of here.
You bastard!
Lady, what did you think he wanted from you? Come on, a guy doesn't immediately bang you because he cares about your opinions. I mean, I know I'm supposed to feel sorry for her, but she's just so lacking in common sense that it's hard to... Shit, well, she didn't deserve that.
Jesus Christ.
Not quite.
So, on one hand, Pinhead is back, so yay. On the other, his face is sticking out the side of a pillar. I'm just gonna try to pretend this doesn't look ridiculous and move on. Anyway, he tries to convince JP that they are alike.
You enjoyed the girl.
Yes.
Good. So did I.
That was creepy, I love that line.
No, what you did, that was fucking evil, man.
There is no good, Monroe. There is no evil. There is only flesh. And the patterns to which we submitted.
No fucking way.
Oh, how touching. That is the gun you used to kill your parents.
So apparently JP killed his parents so he could inherit their money. Nice.
Their fortune was so tempting, their affection so conditional. What else could you do?
And no, he's still a poser.
Show, don't tell movie. You haven't convinced me that I should be afraid of this guy. Really, movie?
Now, can we talk sensibly?
So Pinhead has all joined me and together we can rule the galaxy as father and son, or something.
Imagine a world of the body as canvas, the body as clay, your will and mine as the brush and the knife.
And JP seems pretty much convinced.
I just want to point out that up until this movie, I could not bring myself to edit or talk over Pinhead's dialogue, and now I'm glossing over it. Granted, that could change later once the movie picks up steam, but still.
Meanwhile, Joey has dug up a videotape of one of Kirsty's sessions at the Channard Institute. Not sure when this was supposed to have been recorded, since she was only there for like a day, and she never did get around to telling Channard her whole story, but whatever.
The demons.
Anyway, there's a weird glitch where someone else shows up.
She's telling the truth, Joey.
Back at Joey's place, Terry gets a call from JP, who tries to get her to come over.
Oh, I can't. I just can't!
But fortunately, she doesn't. I forgot to mention that Joey offered to let Terry stay with her indefinitely since she didn't have anywhere else to go. So she's upset when she hears this message.
You got that job in Monterey. Now you're gonna have to sell me your condo.
Despite the fact that Joey probably put in for that job ages ago, and who knows if she'd still want to accept it. And if had she just talked to Joey about it, she could have saved both of them a lot of trouble in the end. Like I said, Terry's an idiot. So obviously Joey comes home to find that Terry has left. Later that night, she has one of those nightmares again. Only this time a new character appears.
Joey, welcome.
The same guy who shows up in the video. And then he shows up on her TV after she wakes up.
You have to help me.
Meanwhile, Terry has gone back to JP. Naturally, he keeps trying to lure her toward the pillar to feed Pinhead.
I want to tell you it's all right.
Okay, that's funny.
No. Come to daddy.
Yeah, you are not Frank. Stop it.
No, I can't.
So there's a struggle and Terry manages to knock JP out. You go, girl.
Why run, Terry?
She tries to leave, but Pinhead lures her back with promises of a new world where things will be better.
Black miracles, dark wonders, another life of unknown pleasures.
Pinhead just needs a victim. He doesn't care which one it is.
Hell has no furies for a woman scorned.
God, she's so weak and pathetic. I'm guessing this probably isn't meant to be funny, but I find it hilarious anyway. So JP gets a couple of pistons shoved into his head and dies, I guess. I just realized that Pinhead didn't actually consume him like he did to the bimbo from earlier, so...
Yeah, why did he need another body before being able to bust out of the pillar?
Anyway, get ready for one of my favorite shots of Pinhead from the entire series. Doug Bradley is just so good at taking a simple gesture like that and making it look majestic.
Well, I'm almost at the halfway mark, and the movie's about to get a lot more interesting, so I'm ending part 1 here. Believe it or not, I do recommend watching it before I get to part 2, as things are about to pick up big time.
So back at Joey's house, she's woken up again to find an old-fashioned radio in her closet. This radio is the very first thing we see in Hellbound before it pulls back to reveal Proto-Pinhead trying to solve the Lament configuration. It wasn't playing music, though. She fiddles with the knob a bit until...
Go to the window, Joey.
There's a familiar scene. He apparently cannot see or hear her, but a door opens. She walks through it, and no, we're not going to see Hell again, sadly. She ends up on a battlefield at nighttime.
I don't understand. Am I dreaming this?
You have to help me. Forgive me.
So we find out that this guy, along with being Proto-Pinhead from the previous movie, is the ghost of Captain Elliot Spencer.
Well done. Brave girl. And you've probably never shaken hands with a ghost before, am I right?
What the hell is going on?
Hell is exactly what is going on, Joey. And we have to stop it.
He says that he needs her help because he cannot interact with the real world, only her dream world. He explains that the war had destroyed him, and as most ex-soldiers became alcoholics, he discovered a different kind of addiction. Cue a recap of the opening to Hellbound, and then Pinhead's death.
Monster as I was bound by laws. Hell has its commandments too, you know.
Told by the man himself. Except that he didn't die exactly. Pinhead's humanity died, but the demon part of him continued to exist, trapped in the pillar.
Well, no longer, Joey. The shell of the beast has been fleshed.
You know, he's part of Pinhead, so I'll allow it.
The shell of the beast has been fleshed. What I was is out there in your world.
So he explains that if she opens the box, it'll bring Pinhead to this other dimension and they can rejoin. It's also mentioned that Pinhead cannot take the box from her, but he can persuade her to give it to him, so she has to be careful about that. Gotta say, I'm not a fan of the whole club setting. I think they're trying to capture that dark feel that Hell had in the previous movie, but it just feels so contrived to me. Also, the movies have had a quiet dignity about them, which was echoed in the previous scene, and then we cut from that to loud-ass rock music, and it's really jarring, in a bad way. This isn't why I'm watching a Hellraiser movie. I can see this shit anywhere. Anyway, stuff in the club starts to come to life. I'm suddenly having Nightmare on Elm Street 2 flashbacks.
I'm here to help you.
Help yourself, fucker! Shall we begin?
So Pinhead wastes everyone in the club in really gruesome ways. And that's pretty much the whole scene. Also, death by icicle fellatio. Because why not? I do get a kick out of the shot at the end where we see blood seeping out from under the door and the screams get progressively quieter as there are fewer people left alive. So Joey hears about it on the news and she calls her camera guy and he agrees to meet her there because he's closer. So she goes and takes the puzzle box with her. And then it's revealed that the news story was an illusion to lure her there. And when she gets there, she can't find the cameraman. Lots of dead bodies, though. Oh my god, is that guy hanging from a hook by his tongue? Ugh. These corpses range from horrific to comical. Didn't I see something like that in a Tom and Jerry cartoon? I also had to pause here to realize that this guy is on a poker table, with poker chips meticulously glued around the edges for some reason, and there are dice in his eyes and poker chips in his mouth, and he's wrapped in Christmas lights for some reason. Okay, that part I caught, but for how quickly they show this, it's hard to tell what all is going on as far as the poker stuff. And then there's the cameraman. Now I'm reminded of Sonic Dreams collection.
Oh, it's unbearable, isn't it? The suffering of strangers, the agony of friends. Its sound is like razors through flesh. Oh, come. Oh, you can hear its faint echo right now. Oh, no, you can't stop me, child. But you don't have to hear the music.
So Pinhead tries to convince her to give him the box.
You're gonna have to come and get me, you ugly fuck.
Oh, spirited.
Yes, Pinhead, we know you like it when they play hard to get.
Oh, I'll enjoy making you bleed. And I'll enjoy making you enjoy it.
That was a great line. So Joey lightly jogs away from Pinhead. Seriously, this is not the body language of someone who is running away in terror. She looks like she's rushing to get to work on time or something and is being careful not to get too sweaty or anything. You know, I get that she's the main character, and so obviously she isn't going to die, at least not yet. But it's a bit weird that we just saw Pinhead horrifically slaughter a building full of people, yet he can only slightly injure this one person.
Have you seen what he did to me, you little bitch?
Freddy, is that you? But yeah, her cameraman has been turned into a Cenobite during the 10 minutes he was off screen.
To be fair, I guess it didn't take that long for Chenard to become a Cenobite in the previous movie either.
But at least a lot happened during that time, so it felt like a lot of time had passed. Plus, we saw part of it, and at least it felt like a big event.
In this movie, it happens off-screen to everyone, and it's treated like an afterthought.
Whoa, what the Ready for your close-up, Joey?
Maybe it is Freddy. And there's the DJ, who is now CD Head. I'm gonna talk more about it later, but long story short, I am not a fan of the Cenobite designs in this movie. And there's another one called Barbie. The cops try to intervene, but that goes about as well for them as you'd expect.
Shit! Gasoline!
And because if there's one thing the earlier Cenobites lacked, it was pithy catchphrases.
That's a wrap.
So glad they corrected that. Anyway, Joey takes refuge in a church.
Just keep coming. They just keep coming.
Who keeps coming?
The demons! The demons!
The demon! The demon!
The demon! The demon!
Also, that was a really goofy sounding read. I can't believe they didn't do another take of that.
Demons? Demons aren't real. They're parables, metaphors.
Then what the fuck is that?
Okay, that was funny.
Welcome to one of my favorite scenes from this whole franchise.
That is a hell of an entrance. I love how the church itself seems to be quaking in fear.
How dare you! Thou shalt not bow down before any graven image.
That's right, he knows all your little sayings and can use them against you. By the way, an earlier script had those little worm things at the ends of the pins burrowing into his hands. I guess they couldn't get the effect right, so instead Pinhead just sticks the pins along with the worms into his own hands, which makes the worms a bit pointless, but the effect is more like a crucifixion.
I am the way.
Really, this scene has no point other than Pinhead mocking Christianity and generally being awesome.
You're burned in hell for this!
Wow, that priest is dumb.
Burn. Oh, such a limited imagination. This is my body. This is my blood. Happy are they who come to my supper.
He's just like, I am Jesus now, bitch. What are you gonna do about it? Ew.
Come on. Come on. Come on and get it. This is what you want.
And Joey goes for another little jog. And now we see that JP and Terry have become Cenobites. Again, off screen.
I can dream now, Joey. Oh, you wouldn't believe what I can dream of now.
Relax, baby. This is better than sex.
Get it? 'Cause JP liked to bang a lot of women. Ha! And why is Joey just standing there?
The handmaid, Joey. A shadow of my former troops.
That's putting it nicely.
Play with this pinhead!
So Joey finally does something useful and solves the puzzle box, sending back all the Cenobites. But then she gets sent somewhere. A bright sunny field, where her father is waiting for her.
It's a reward, oh Daddy.
They said you'd have something for me. Something you won't need anymore.
This. Here, take it.
God damn it, Joey, you had one job.
Thank you, Joey.
couldn't resist playing games, could you?
Captain Spencer to the rescue.
And now, we're going to hell. Ladies first. No! You'll like her better this way. Trust me.
Why does this movie feel the need to make Pinhead look goofy?
There is a world out there waiting to yield to us. So much flesh. So many different pleasures.
So now it's the good and bad halves of Pinhead against each other, with Joey hanging in the balance.
You're right. You do belong together.
And when Captain Spencer grabs Pinhead, for some reason they merge. And for some reason that doesn't seem to do anything.
Now, where were we?
Though apparently Captain Spencer is in there, he just has a hard time having any control.
Joey! Send me to hell!
So it helps, it just doesn't cause Pinhead to revert to how he was previously.
Go to hell.
I guess if she can't open the box, stabbing him with it will do. Jesus, even his death looks goofy. Bye, Pinhead. See you next movie. So only the box is left, and Joey goes to a construction site and drops it into some wet cement. Good thing that's the only one, huh? Granted, she can't really know that, but I don't think this movie does either.
Or the next one.
Apparently depositing the puzzle box at this construction site somehow results in the coolest looking building ever. The end.
So that was Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. I want to like this movie, I really do.
On one hand, it has some of my favorite Pinhead scenes from the series. This movie makes him look so awesome. Usually. But those bits are just kind of floating in a sea of mediocrity.
I just cannot get into the first half of this movie.
The previous movies had Pinhead not making an extended appearance until past the halfway mark. In the first movie, it was 2/3 of the way through, but they kept it interesting with compelling characters. This movie has Pinhead showing up only about 1/3 of the way through, and not only do they make him look silly up until the halfway point, but
the other characters just do not carry this movie on their own.
I kind of like Terry because she's kind of adorable and I just can't help it, but I don't care about the drama between her and Joey and her and JP. JP is a tool and is no substitute for Frank. And while I normally like Terry Farrell, Joey is little more than the glue holding this plot together. She's not interesting and there isn't even any real closure for her character arc. The movie brings up her wanting to be a serious reporter and that she has unresolved issues with her father's death. And neither is really resolved unless you count her finding out secondhand that she got a job she wanted. Even the soundtrack is uninspired. It's mostly club music combined with reused tracks from the first movie. Or if they aren't, they at least sound like it, whereas Hellbound's soundtrack was more unique sounding. I mean, I picked up the soundtrack CD at a thrift store recently, and just look at the track listing on the back. First of all, nothing by Christopher Young, who did the music for the first two movies. And I mean, one of the songs is done by KMFDM, who is also on the Mortal Kombat movie soundtrack. Not to pick on them or anything.
This kind of music is fine as action movie soundtrack fare, but
for a Hellraiser movie? However, the scenes involving Captain Elliot Spencer are great, and it's nice seeing Doug Bradley without makeup for a change. He has a certain charm and a demeanor that commands respect.
He's compelling is what I think I'm trying to say.
And the second half of the movie is entertaining and fun, though a lot of what's entertaining about it falls into so bad it's awesome territory.
This feels like two different movies awkwardly squished together and...
frankly, it focuses far too much on the club and rock bullshit in the first half. In fact, the abrupt cut from this scene to the next...
very inventive.
...is kind of the general feel of this movie in a nutshell.
So, I guess I recommend this movie in a mindless entertainment sort of way, but it is a huge step down from the first two.
So this is the point where I talk about the Cenobites. It's probably going to be shorter than usual because even in the movies that aren't that great, usually the Cenobites are interesting. These ones are just so gimmicky. Like, this guy has a camera which appears to be almost comically shoved into his head. Really, his mustache sets him apart more than anything else because Cenobites are usually hairless, and this is the first one we've seen with facial hair. Other than that, he has a bunch of vertical cuts that can be seen through big windows in his outfit. Moving on. CD Head has CDs in his head, along with a CD tray in his chest which dispenses CDs that he uses like shurikens, which is kinda silly. He also has chains on him. Moving on. Barbie is kind of the butterball of this movie, only he's wrapped in barbed wire and breathes fire. That just leaves us with the Cenobites that the two of the main characters from earlier in the movie became. JP becomes Piston Head because there are pistons in his head. He is at least unique in that we can hear the pistons making whirring sounds as they constantly jab in and out of his head, and it causes him to have this sort of facial tic. I have to admit that's kind of cool. Terry becomes Dreamer, who is the least gimmicky of the Cenobites of this movie. There are hooks around her face stretching the skin, her forearms are flayed with the effect looking like opera-length gloves, and there is an opening on her neck where a cigarette has been inserted which she is constantly smoking. Other than that, her outfit is very skimpy, which is kind of fitting as it echoes how she dressed when she was human. The Cenobite Wiki refers to these as pseudo-Cenobites because they were made quickly and still have a memory of when they were human. But all that applies to Chenard's Cenobite as well, and he's considered a full-on Cenobite, so I don't know if there's really anything to that or not. As for Pinhead...
This is my body. This is my blood. Happy are they who come to my supper.
Yes, there are about 2 to 3 scenes with him that I love, and he has some great lines.
I am the way.
But there's an interesting conundrum with this character. He has great dialogue and a wonderfully majestic appearance along with a certain mystique. Therefore, we think we want to see more of him. The problem is that when he's on screen too long and has too much dialogue, he loses that mystique and a lot of what endears him to us. So, believe it or not, in a way, one of my complaints about this movie is too much Pinhead. We really should not have seen him until this scene, and he should have had a lot less dialogue overall. He pretty much never shuts up when he's on camera. He basically becomes that kind of villain that just constantly yammers about his motivations, and he emotes too much again, although it's much worse in this movie than in the previous one. Not to mention that we see him get reduced to a slasher film villain, although I admit it's an intriguing concept on its own. Take a torture technician and give him free rein to let him kill as many people as possible, as horrifically as possible, and just watch the bodies hit the floor. And I know there was an explanation for his acting this way, but still, I guess what I'm saying is that it's an interesting concept, but not really a good idea in practice. So at least this movie got it out of the way so we could get it out of our systems and not have to see it again. Also, this scene played out differently in an earlier script. Pinhead confronted a police officer and silenced him by putting one end of a handcuff through his tongue. And of course it was followed by the scene in the church, so the idea was that Pinhead had a confrontation with humanity's law, and then he is confronted with spiritual law, and neither means anything to him because he is just that badass. It's too bad that was left out of the final product. Also, I'm sure I'll never hear the end of it if I don't mention that there was music by Motorhead in this movie. It's a good song and all, but again, I'm not too crazy about having rock music in a Hellraiser movie, so I just can't get too excited about it. However, I have to admit that the video's pretty cool. Naturally, it involves clips from the movie, but they also had Doug Bradley appear as Pinhead, and he plays poker against the lead singer. And loses? What the fuck? Okay, you lost me there, video. Not cool. Anyway, I hate that I've sounded so negative. But honestly, whenever I thought of this movie, I would tend to think of that scene where Pinhead first appears outside of that silly pillar, and when he torments the priest. And now that I'm watching it again, I find the rest of it to be disappointing. I know I'm in the minority here, but I actually prefer the following movie, Bloodline. Granted, it's been a while since I've seen it, so we'll see if I still feel that way when I get to it. Anyway, that's about all I have to say about Hellraiser 3: Hell on Earth. I do recommend it just for the second half, even if it's just a lot of dumb fun. That's it for now. See you next time.
Demons? Demons aren't real. They're parables, metaphors.
Then what the fuck is that?
Hey, this is Dina. Welcome to the Den. Well, we've made it to the 4th installment of the Hellraiser franchise. From what I've read, this movie was an absolute disaster to film. Some of what went wrong was just bad luck, but some of it was executive meddling in the form of Miramax going, "Hey, we need more Pinhead," and Clive Barker would go, "No, too much Pinhead causes him to not be scary anymore. No, more Pinhead, just add more blood to make up for it."
I'm not even exaggerating, that is literally how a conversation went. Also, here's an interesting fact, although it's probably more interesting to me than you guys, but I'm gonna share it anyway.
This movie was co-directed by Kevin Yeager. The reason I know that name is because he did the animatronics for the first 4 Child's Play / Chucky movies, the first 3 of which I'm a huge fan of, not to mention that he made the Crypt Keeper for Tales from the Crypt along with other effects for that show. And he did the animatronics for my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movies, so I'm actually kind of a fan of his. Except I thought he just did FX, I didn't even know he ever did any directing.
So how did I only just find out that he co-directed this movie?
Whew, that's never a good sign.
But I'll go into how that happened later. For now, let's give this movie a chance, okay?
Geez, movie, it's a little early for a jump scare, don't you think? The credits haven't even started yet. And the movie opens on a space station. Yeah, I know that's a weird way to start a Hellraiser movie, but it does make sense in context, as we'll find out later. Still, this gives me such a Star Trek vibe. After a bit, we find out that someone on the station is apparently trying to program a robot to open a puzzle box. That's either really bad CG or he's looking at some kind of VR display so that he can see exactly what he's making the robot do. The movie doesn't make it totally clear, but I'm hoping it's the latter because yikes. Either way, it apparently worked, and
I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I'll save that for the end.
But now he has trapped Pinhead just in time for some armed guards to burst in. Through some exposition, we find out that he was the one who designed the station, which he has hijacked and had all the power directed into one room.
Evaluation.
Wacko.
I wasn't asking you, Carducci, I was asking the expert. Well, Rimmer?
When your expert's name is Rimmer, you know you're in trouble.
Rimmer!
I am he!
I actually don't know for sure, but with this taking place in space and Clive Barker being British, I'm going to assume this is a Red Dwarf reference.
Unfortunately, they don't really do anything fun with it, and having a character named Rimmer is just kind of distracting.
I'm playing the endgame here, Rimmer.
Rimmer!
Finishing something that began centuries ago, and I don't have the time to help you understand.
So the man is interrogated.
And things your little rational mind couldn't even dream of. But I dream. Oh, I dream.
Please don't reference Hell on Earth.
Oh, you wouldn't believe what I can dream of now.
Anyway, as it turns out, he built the space station with the intention of trapping something.
Hell is what I'm going to catch, and I'm gonna burn it away in a blaze of light. If I tell you the whole story, will you let me finish what I began?
Apparently, Rimmer is willing to hear him out. So now we flash back to 18th century France. It turns out that this man is descended from, and forgive my bad pronunciation, Philippe Le Marchand, the toy maker who made the very first puzzle box.
Commissioned by a wealthy aristocrat named Delille, a man obsessed with black magic, a leader of the occult.
Not only is it really cool to witness the creation of the most iconic image besides Pinhead in this series, but this directly references the Hellbound heart, where the puzzle box was most often referred to as Le Marchand's box. In fact, here's a quote from the book. Le Marchand, who had been, in his time, a maker of singing birds, had constructed the box so that opening it tripped a musical mechanism, which began to tinkle a short rondo of sublime banality.
Yeah, there was a lot of purple prose in the book.
Finest toy maker in France.
Well, what does it do?
Oh. Doesn't actually do anything.
You are a terrible wife. Anyway, he immediately wants to drop it off. Can't imagine why he'd want to get away from her for a bit.
Why?
Because my work might be appreciated there. My son will be born in a better place than this. This is only the beginning.
He has no idea how appropriate that phrase is. So meanwhile, the aristocrat Delille and his assistant Jacques have invited a peasant girl to have dinner with them.
Jacques, show this child to a chair.
What is this?
so you don't bruise.
How she misses the red flags here until it's too late is beyond me.
Now we can begin.
Lamar Chand shows up with the box.
Good night, toy maker.
And right away he can tell something is off, so he decides to stick around outside and snoop, which I'm sure won't have any repercussions. Anyway, he witnesses them flaying the body and hanging the intact skin on hooks. Yeesh. They do a ritual involving the box that causes a portal to hell to open up and a female demon, Angelique, to materialize in the skin. And good lord, is that ever gruesome.
Fear not, Jock. Remember your lessons. A summoned demon is yours to command. Unless you stand in hell's way.
I'm not sure if Angelique is scared or angry or just confused, but she seems to get over it pretty quick. So Lamar Chand, obviously horrified, starts designing something that will neutralize the power of the box. I'm not sure how he thinks he'll do that, since he said himself that he only made the mechanical aspects of the box and probably doesn't understand the mystical aspects that were added later, but oh well. He does plan to steal back the box, so maybe he thinks he can reverse engineer that somehow. When Lamar Chand returns, he finds that Delille has been killed and Jacques has basically taken over, having made Angelique his slave. Who didn't see that one coming? He gets caught and finds out that his family is now cursed for generations.
Demons will walk the earth, and you're responsible. What are you waiting for? Kill him and come back where you belong.
Such pliant fingers.
Also, his pregnant wife has followed him and manages to find him just before he dies.
My God.
Save yourself. Save the child.
And so ends the creator of the Lament configuration.
Demons did walk the earth, the same way they're walking this station right now.
Back to present, or future, time. It's mentioned that Angelique has had many boxes made. So now we have an explanation for all those boxes in Hellraiser 2. But what she was really trying to accomplish was a box that would open the door to hell permanently.
I know what's in your heart.
Fast forward to 1996 to the first descendant in the story, John Merchant, who has been dreaming of Angelique. So it turns out that all of Lamar Chand's descendants, to varying degrees, have dreams and memories about Angelique and the box.
And they just don't haunt my dreams. They haunt my work.
And while some critics have complained about that, I think that genetic memory is hardly the strangest thing to come out of the Hellraiser universe, and it fits the narrative, so I'm fine with it. But anyway, John is the architect who designed that awesome building that showed up at the end of Hell on Earth, and has gotten his picture on a magazine cover for it, which is seen by Angelique, who is still in Paris with Jacques, who apparently doesn't age. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they didn't give an explanation for that.
I think we should see America.
Screw America.
Then I would like your permission to go by myself.
No.
That was really stupid, Jacques.
Want to know why I'd like to go?
No.
Stupid smug bastard. It was mentioned earlier that Angelique has to be his slave on the condition that he doesn't stand in Hell's way.
Is that your final word?
Yes.
Well, he just did. Poor stupid Jacques didn't even bother to find out why she wanted to go to America, and I think that's what Angelique was counting on.
What you want is irrelevant. It's about what I want.
He still has no idea what's going on. It's amazing that he managed to live 200 years while being that stupid.
Don't move.
Why?
So you won't bruise.
And that sounds familiar.
Perhaps I was a bit hasty.
Yes. You like it rough.
Yeah, it doesn't end well for Jacques. I guess we've seen worse from this series, but this scene is still kind of cringe-inducing. That seems a bit familiar, too.
Nothing personal, babe.
Anyway, back in New York, John is accepting an award. But while giving his speech, he gets a bit distracted when he spots Angelique in the crowd.
Leonardo da Vinci once said that no work of art is ever completed.
He gets through it relatively well, all things considered. Mainly he just comes across like he has really bad stage fright, and not so much like he's seen a ghost.
Thank you. Good night.
After John leaves, Angelique lures a guy to the basement with her.
Ooh, yeah.
Do you like games?
Again, red flags everywhere. How does he miss them?
Close your eyes. Trust me.
Angelique mentions that she's following her instincts, which is basically true because she comes across a pillar and realizes that there's a puzzle box inside. Apparently the same one from Hell on Earth that Joey dropped into some cement.
By the way, I just realized.
Isn't it kind of weird that they left wet cement overnight? Like, wouldn't they supervise it while it was drying?
I have such sights to show you.
Yeah, we've heard that one before.
I have such sights to show you.
We have such sights to show you.
So anyway, she gets this poor schmuck to open the puzzle box. And here come the hooks! Ow!
What's happening?
Get over here!
That would actually be an awesome crossover. I know Scorpion has spent some time in hell.
Okay, I demand fan fiction where Scorpion works part-time as an acting Cenobite between Mortal Kombat tournaments. Oh, and look who decided to show up, right around the halfway mark, right on schedule. And I like how the tune from the first movie plays, but unlike Hellraiser 3, it sounds less like it's just being reused and more like a new composer is putting his own spin on it. By the way, the new composer in question is Daniel Light, who also composed the soundtrack for Silent Hill Downpour.
And Book of Memories, but we won't hold that against him.
Angelique.
So here's an interesting fact.
Angelique is surprised to see Pinhead, which makes sense. She was pulled out of hell in the 18th century and Pinhead wasn't there until the 20th century.
Hell is more ordered since your time, Princess. And much less amusing.
But there might be more to it than that. That's another thing I'm going to talk about at the end.
The box did this.
A man did this, but the box called him.
So anyway, Angelique fills him in on Lamar Chand and John.
This is not a room. This is a Holocaust waiting to wake itself.
Later, Angelique finds John at his workplace and finds Lamar Chand's design for the anti-puzzle box. So it turns out that the idea behind it is perpetual light.
I haven't perfected the light yet. Something's missing and I can't make it work.
Even if Lamar Chand had lived long enough to attempt to build this, he probably wouldn't have had the technology. And maybe John doesn't either.
You think you don't remember, but your blood knows.
So Angelique has some trick up her sleeve to help him remember his past lives.
Angelique.
You think your work on the building was an accident? It called to you, John. We have great work to do.
Welcome to another one of my favorite shots of Pinhead. He's petting a dove, which is ironic for two reasons. Firstly, it comes across as a pet the dog moment, which is when an evil character is shown to have a nice streak.
But there's also a fun clash of symbolism here.
We know where Pinhead is from, yet the dove is a symbol for peace in the Bible. Either way, he feeds it to his doggy.
Well, we're about at the halfway point, and
frankly, the next scene is pretty fucked up, and I want to put off talking about it as long as I can.
So if you haven't seen Hellraiser Bloodline yet, go watch it before I get to part 2.
So she starts asking me all kinds of weird questions. Like, would I do it with a woman that used to be a man? So what'd you say? I mean, I guess so, if she was cut and all.
Can I just say that I have a huge soft spot for these two security guards? I don't know what it is, but they are so adorable. The scene is shot like the directors wanted to make damn sure we could tell that they hired actual twins and there was no split screen or anything involved.
A pity the mirror will not show your true beauty, Princess. I can smell the exquisite stench of what you really are.
That was pretty creepy, Pinhead, even for you.
We should check it out. Speak for yourself.
Seriously, you guys, this is not a good idea.
This is getting weird.
Pinhead has hooks stuck in his fingers, which looks awesome, but apparently it happened during one of the many scenes that was cut from this movie.
In this game, we show ourselves as we really are.
What's that?
The beauty of suffering.
Hook in the skin. But Angelique likes it, so there. Nice jump scare.
Now on, we stick together. Always together.
Oh boy.
Freeze!
Oh no, not the adorable security guards. Leave him alone, Pinhead.
Don't make us put some pain on you.
Pain.
Pinhead does have a couple of great speeches in this movie, and this is one of them.
What you think of as pain is only a shadow. Pain has a face. Allow me to show it to you. Gentlemen, I am pain. I know your fear. Please, don't separate me from my brother. I give you my word. That will never happen. A lesson, princess. Work with me or for me.
This scene is really hard for me to watch. Yeah, they aren't so adorable anymore. I do think it's interesting that we see the tubes with needles and the blue fluid, like when Channard's Cenobite was made in Hellraiser 2.
Suffering is the coin of the realm. I will teach your human merchant about the value of suffering. They say the greatest suffering a parent can know is the loss of a child.
Wow, that was like a 3-hit suffer combo.
Anyway, the gist of this conversation was that there's a power struggle going on. Angelique and Pinhead have different methods, and Pinhead seems determined to bring her over to the dark side, so to speak.
Whatever you want.
A little later, Angelique tries to seduce John, again. Meanwhile, Pinhead grabs John's kid, while the mom has left him alone for a bit to do laundry.
Young. Unformed.
Yeah, there's something a parent never wants to see, even if they don't know who Pinhead is.
Give him to me, please!
Oh, you suffer beautifully. But I am here for business, not pleasure.
I always felt that the two went together for him.
I want bait. Live bait.
All of the parents watching this just shit themselves. Well, John comes home and... Well, I said that we wouldn't get to see any more of Hell after Hellraiser 2, and that's technically true, but we do get a little taste of it here. And it feels legitimate, and not like a goth club. So Pinhead has a pet of some kind that we've only caught little glimpses of until now.
John, don't!
Meet Chatterbeast. Yeah, Chatterer never returns, but from this point on we do get to see Cenobites that are clearly inspired by him.
Although the boy will not die here, for 1,000 years his dearest wish will be that he had.
For God's sake. Do I look like someone who cares what God thinks?
That's one of my favorite Pinhead lines.
Just tell me what you want.
So Pinhead basically tells him that he wants him to finish his work. What he actually wants is for Merchant to make a device that would keep the doors open to Hell permanently, and since Hell has already bled into the basement of the building, he wants to start there.
Come on!
That's cute that he thought he could get away like that. Actually, he does manage to get his wife and kid to safety, but he still has to confront Pinhead.
It's me you want.
Don't flatter yourself.
This isn't a game.
This is a game. I shall go first.
That was just weird.
Run!
Meanwhile, Mom is being pursued by Chatterbeast. I keep wanting to call him Chatterdog. Shit, that thing is terrifying.
Does this pathway work both ways?
She didn't actually solve it, so I don't know how that worked.
Toymaker.
So now Angelique has the kid.
So young. So tender.
What must that kid be thinking right now? Angelique actually wants the anti-lament configuration to be made. Hell, apparently it's called the Elysium configuration, because she wants no part of Hell and wants it destroyed so she is no longer held to it. Also, Pinhead didn't know that. He thought they had the same goal, but that she was just going about it in a way that he didn't like. So she is about to be in some serious frickin' trouble. John does get it to work. For a little while. But not long enough to destroy Pinhead.
No more games.
Wow, Pinhead must have been pissed.
Fatality.
You go play with your dog, you bastard!
How does she keep sending people back to Hell without solving the damn box? That's really bugging me. Anyway, Angelique and Pinhead both get sent back to hell and the building explodes. Though apparently Mom and Kid escape. Back to present/future time. This merchant finally gets back to what he was doing when the armed guards got there. And yeah, he had summoned Pinhead.
We'd almost given up waiting for you to play.
What's wrong with this is I don't believe in hell.
Of course not, you only believe in one thing.
Aliens! But it believes in you, and it's out there right now.
I don't frighten easily.
Then you're not Rimmer after all.
Excuse me, gentlemen, while I have a humiliating panic attack under the scanner table.
So he has 23 minutes to complete his mission. She seems like she's beginning to come around, but not enough to disobey her orders. Meanwhile, one of the other guards is being lured toward the locked door. I guess it isn't too unreasonable for him to believe that some innocent person is locked in there. All he knows is that Merchant is not right in the head. He doesn't know the rest of the story.
What the hell is this? The remnants of a most unsatisfying victim.
Hooks again! Except that actually looks kind of funny. Not anymore. So it's barely a footnote, but the security guards were turned into the Siamese twins Cenobite. And Angelique also became a Cenobite off-screen, forming Pinhead's new entourage, along with Chatterbeast, I guess. So another armed guard goes off to find the previous guy.
Parker's dead.
This is suddenly turning into a slasher film.
Parker's dead. Oh, God.
Help me, please!
Cenobites have sure gotten better at mind games, haven't they? Or maybe it's just because Angelique started out as a demon and had those powers already. Anyway, he loses his head somehow?
Mr. Chamberlain?
Where the fuck planet are you from?
See, aliens. That was a lot more impressive than with JP's gun. Less silly looking, too. He manages to hide from Pinhead. Nice jump scare, but ends up as Chatterdog food.
Carducci, come in!
So it's just Rimmer and the other guard, and of course he decides to go looking for one of the others because horror movie.
He said it could protect me. He told me what to do.
Please, go ahead. It's just a box.
And he's screwed.
Thank God for men of reason. Finish it.
And while the fact that he dies is cliche, I'll give the movie credit for giving him a really unique death scene. Not how I would have expected him to die, I've got to admit.
Now, the final movement begins.
And now it's down to Pinhead versus Merchant.
You and your ancestors have proved worthy opponents. The taste of victory is almost bittersweet.
He seems enthralled with the image of planet Earth.
Glorious.
Apparently the first photo taken of Earth from space was in 1946, and Pinhead became what he is around 2 decades before then. So it stands to reason that this is the first time Pinhead is seeing it like that. Kind of interesting that he even knows what it is. That's not really a criticism of the movie, just an observation.
There are more humans alive at this moment than in all its pitiful history. The Garden of Eden.
You're going to say Garden of Flesh, aren't you? Go ahead.
A garden of flesh.
Double back down this hallway and get to the shuttle.
So Merchant tells Rimmer to go back and wait for him.
Oh my God.
Follow the Rimmer-shaped blur.
Here, Doggy.
I'm having Resident Evil flashbacks. Is she gonna kill it with a spin kick? Actually, she lures it into a pressurized room and... Bye, Doggy. Meanwhile...
You are so very like your ancestor. Did you know that?
Almost like they were played by the same actor, huh?
The same faithless hope in the light.
And what do you have faith in?
Nothing. I am so exquisitely empty.
That's an interesting line. I think it's just meant to be an answer to the question and not have any hidden meaning, but it sounds sad?
then it won't hurt you to die.
I cannot die. I am forever.
In the movie sequel sense, it would seem that way. That expression is priceless.
Where are you, Toymaker?
Here. Hologram.
Woo, checkmate goes to Merchant.
What have you done?
And the ship folds up and becomes the LCM configuration, which kind of reminds me of in Hellraiser 2 when Leviathan became a giant lament configuration. And Pinhead's last word before he is utterly destroyed? Well said, Hell Priest.
Set a course for Red Dwarf. The slime's coming home.
The end. So that was Hellraiser Bloodline. I enjoy the hell out of this movie. It's not perfect or anything, but I'm surprised at how many people just brush it off and say things like, only the first 3 movies are good, the rest suck, as if this one deserves to be lumped in with the straight-to-video sequels. It's not as good as the first 2, but it's definitely better than Hell on Earth, or at the very least it feels more like a Hellraiser movie to me. Even the scenes that take place on the space station, it somehow feels like it takes place in the same universe despite the sudden addition of sci-fi, where that goth club in Hell on Earth felt posery. There are some bits and pieces in this movie that don't quite add up, as I pointed out, but for the most part it works for me. I wonder if part of the reason people are so hard on this movie is because, well, the creators don't like it. Like I said in the beginning, filming this movie was a disaster. What basically happened is that when the film was well into production, the studio complained about how Pinhead wasn't to show up until about an hour into the film and demanded that some of the earlier scenes be cut so that Pinhead could show up as early as possible. Kevin Yeager had been the director up until that point, but he became so frustrated with the demands that he walked out. They had to bring in another director to go over the script, cut out as much as possible, and try to repiece everything together and shoot some new scenes to make it cohesive. In the end, neither director wanted the director credit, hence directed by Alan Smithy. For those who don't know, that was a common pseudonym that directors would use when they were embarrassed by how a film they were working on turned out and didn't want their name attached. As for what they changed, well, the segment taking place in the 18th century was cut way down. In fact, the movie originally was going to open with Lamar Chand making the puzzle box, and when he dropped it off, Angelique was already there. When he looked in the window, he was originally seeing a poker game that went weird. Angelique has the players pass around the puzzle box, and each time they make a successful move with it, she removes an article of clothing. Once every move has been made on the box, she removes the last article of clothing, revealing screaming mouths and demonic eyes on her skin. Meanwhile, the chandelier becomes a death machine that mutilates and kills the players, who return later, some as Cenobites and some as clowns. Later on, Lamar Chand is invited to a masquerade where he ends up having it out with Delille, who doesn't like the fact that the box was made to replace his own black magic, i.e. the door to hell was previously opened up using a pentagram and incantations from an expert in black magic like him, but with the puzzle box anyone can do it. Angelique kills Delille, but he comes back and sends her back to hell, but Jacques summons her back. Now remember when I said that Angelique looks surprised and disappointed when Pinhead shows up? An early script has her saying, "Things seem to have changed. I was expecting my clowns." And now Pinhead's line about hell being more ordered and less amusing makes more sense. But anyway, I think it's important to note that in the earlier version of the script, Angelique and Lamar Chand had a lot of screen time together, and she was pretty successful in getting him under her power. Where in the final cut, they spend all of about 2 seconds in the same room together where she flirts with him like one time before he gets killed. This is another thing that helps to explain some of what happens in the final cut, why John Merchant has such a connection to her and has erotic dreams about her. Also, the final descendant in the story, Paul Merchant, his knowledge of his bloodline is explained by the middle segment ending with the mom telling Jack that as he grows up, the two of them will research their family history and pass the story along, so the future generations will know what to do if Pinhead comes back. And this resulted in Paul practically obsessing over it and becoming kind of eccentric in the process. Also, originally he was going to sacrifice himself in the end when killing Pinhead. Now, I did not thoroughly research this. The script I read for reference here was not a shooting script, and a lot of little things were different. For example, there were no twin security guards, and so we didn't get to see how the twin Cenobite was made. It was a woman security guard who was attacked by Chatterbeast, and the twin Cenobite just shows up later with no explanation of where it came from. Also, Rimmer wasn't a main character and was one of the first guards to get killed off. Instead, Paul Merchant had an assistant named Corinne Cotton, and she was the one who helped him in the end instead of Rimmer.
And I doubt that scenes like that were shot and then replaced with other scenes later.
But I suspect that the early scenes involving Lamar Chand were pretty close to what was originally shot. What's funny is that an early trailer even came out. Even Pinhead's voice hadn't been digitally enhanced yet.
Welcome to Oblivion.
That showed a lot of what ended up being cut.
So would it have been better had the studio not taken a bat to it? Oh yeah, of course. I totally get why the creators don't like the finished product,
considering what they had in mind. However, speaking as a less biased viewer,
I honestly think it works pretty well as is, all things considered.
With the added backstory, it would have had more weight to it, it would have been better,
but in my opinion, it's far from the god-awful piece of crap people make it out to be.
But one thing about this movie that makes it work, and another thing that elevates it above Hell on Earth to me, is that the characters, even if they're toned down from what they were supposed to be, are really interesting and the actors do a great job. I know I joked about how one actor plays 3 different characters who are related, and it is kind of an amusing trope, but I actually don't find it distracting in this case.
He plays each one differently, and they come across as very distinct.
Lamar Chand has an almost childlike innocence about him. John Merchant comes across more like an antisocial, reclusive type, tormented by nightmares. And Paul Merchant is really intense and eccentric, and the makeup department does a good job with further distinguishing them from each other. It's amazing what a different hair color and style, or lack thereof, can do.
It doesn't hurt that I think he's adorable, especially as Lamar Chand.
Then again, I am kind of a sucker for period costumes.
Also, one final note about Paul Merchant.
This might go without saying, but his being bald was meant to show that he was Pinhead's equal. Also, from what I gather, their scene together would have lasted a lot longer than it did in the finished product.
Well, when I covered Hell on Earth, I kind of skimmed over the Cenobites because
I thought most of them were kind of lame.
But I love the Cenobites in Bloodline, so sit tight because we're going to be here a while.
It almost feels like there aren't a lot of Cenobites in this movie, but I think that's because most of them don't show up until the final act. Besides Pinhead, there are 3, just like in the first 2 movies.
Another reason might be that I tend to not think of Chatterbeast as a Cenobite,
since he comes across more as Pinhead's pet than one of his soldiers. So what the hell is Chatterbeast anyway? This doesn't look like something that was once human. The Hellraiser wiki says that it's made from the flesh of tortured humans, but that doesn't explain its shape. Also, I think that info comes from the box that the toy comes in, so I don't know how canon that is. This isn't something the movie's ever really explored, but I like the idea that maybe not every creature in this series' version of Hell was once human, and that some were demons. Maybe Cenobites are made to resemble these demons, or maybe some Cenobites were never human to begin with. Angelique is proof that non-human demons exist, and she becomes a Cenobite. Also, later in the series, there are Cenobites who have no noses, with no scars or anything, implying that they were removed, and therefore they don't look like they were ever quite human. So I digress a bit, but what I'm trying to say is that even though he looks Cenobite-ish, Chatterbeast could really be anything. Either way, he's pretty damn terrifying and a unique addition to the series.
Always nice to see creators thinking outside the box.
From now on, we stick together. Always together. Right.
Oh, those poor security guards.
This was actually the only Hellraiser movie I saw in the theater, and when this scene came up,
it really made me squirm in my chair.
I told the friend I saw it with about that later, and she kind of shrugged it off and pointed out that it wasn't like it was a realistic death, so it didn't bother her any.
And I realized she was right, and I was left wondering why it affected me that much. I just kind of chalked it up to the theater experience.
I do kind of have a problem with graphic depictions of torture in horror movies. I mean, I'm not calling for it to be banned or anything, but I tend to avoid those kinds of movies because they aren't for me.
I know that sounds ironic coming from a Hellraiser fan, but these movies are kind of tame in that area, compared to movies that tend to be labeled as torture porn. With all of Pinhead's talk of suffering, most of that actually happens off-screen. And then there's also the fact that it has kind of a mystical setting, and like my friend pointed out, these are not things that could happen in reality, so that usually helps. But here I am 20 years later, and this scene is still hard for me to watch.
And I think it's because, as silly as it seems with how little screen time they get, I care about these characters.
They don't seem to be very good security guards. In fact, they come across as downright dumb. But they seem friendly and they're kind of goofy. If anything, their dumbness is kind of charming.
They're just cute.
Add to that how scared they get toward the end, which already gives them whoopee status, but then Pinhead points out that their greatest fear is being separated from each other, which kind of implies some kind of childhood trauma, like maybe they were orphans or something and were worried about being separated from each other and they never totally got over that.
I want to hug these guys.
So yeah, them being turned into Cenobites on screen just breaks my heart. Compare that to two of the main characters in Hell on Earth and how I barely even give a shit about them becoming Cenobites. But anyway, the twin Cenobite ends up having a pretty cool design. The way their faces are stretched in opposing directions has a comedy and tragedy look. They each appear to be missing an arm, and there is a diamond-shaped hole cut in the middle of their outfit, revealing that they are crudely stitched together. And I don't know if this is canon since it's hard to tell in the movie, but the action figure appears to have 2 feet, so they appear to each be missing a leg as well. Then again, in the movie, when they separate, they appear to each have 2 arms and don't appear to be hopping around as they move, so I'm not sure how that works. In any case, this is such a bizarre design that I can't help but get a kick out of it. Also, fun fact, I thought this guy was going to end up forming a 3rd head, which would have been interesting. Instead, they just seem to crush him and go back to the way they were.
I forget. You like it rough, don't you?
Please.
Angelique is an interesting character. Apparently in Hell she was a princess, which brings up some questions involving how that works. The Cenobite wiki tries to tie it to Hellraiser 2 by saying she's the daughter of Leviathan. So how can this thing have offspring? Maybe the idea is that Leviathan directly created her, where Cenobite started off as human.
I don't know, that's just speculation.
Am I the only one who sees kind of a similarity between Angelique and Julia from Hellraiser 2? They're both demonic women who are very attractive brunettes who are able to seduce male characters into doing things for them. And both of them physically rip the heart out of a guy who abused them in the past. So while I wouldn't call her an XP of Julia, I do like how there's a similarity. Julia was more fun in a way because she started out as a bored housewife and took a level in badass. Also this.
Take your best shot, Snow White.
Where I feel Angelique is probably the opposite. I suspect she was more powerful in Hell.
Again, I just think that's interesting.
Speaking of Angelique, she isn't played like a sympathetic character, but I still feel kind of sorry for her. She spends nearly the entire movie being a slave to someone. Originally it was to be Delille, and the original script kind of alluded to what that entailed. Ew. And then the ownership was transferred to Jacques. And then Jacques screwed up and she killed him, at which point she's kinda sorta free, but she's still connected to Hell. And then she summons Pinhead, and there's a power struggle that ends with her becoming a Cenobite, and therefore she's now his slave. And that was the last thing she wanted, because she clearly doesn't like Pinhead and what he represents, and the fun version of Hell that she knew was gone. So she chose to try to destroy Hell so she could just stay on Earth, and that clearly didn't work out. And Cenobites are generally emotionless, so there isn't really any hint that she's unhappy, but knowing her history, I feel kind of bad that she became a Cenobite. Speaking of which, I love her design. She's the most scantily clad female Cenobite so far, and she's wearing PVC or latex instead of the usual leather, which is appropriate to how she previously used her sexuality as a weapon. Meanwhile, her scalp is sliced open and the edges are stretched down and hook onto her shoulders with wires. And yet her face is still intact, so despite that, she's still beautiful.
What's kind of interesting, and personally I would not have caught this on my own, but after finding out, I can't unsee it.
Her design is based off of a nun's habit. There's the high collar along with how the wires form the shape that a nun's headdress makes. And fun fact, one of the creators got the idea while watching Sister Act. And the original drawing he did ended up not changing much in the final product. He was really happy with it. Also, yet another scene that was cut involved Cenobite Angelique and Paul Merchant, making the 3rd act in the final cut the only one where Angelique doesn't interact with a member of that bloodline. Kind of a shame.
In this game, we show ourselves as we really are. The beauty of suffering.
And now Pinhead.
Character-wise, I don't quite understand his motivations. I'm not sure why he suddenly wants for Hell to bleed into Earth. I mean, from what we've seen of Hell, it's freaking huge. How is that not enough space? Maybe it's more along the lines of being bored with not having enough victims and how he has to wait for them to come to him. I don't know how I feel about Pinhead suddenly wanting to rock the boat, since he's supposed to be all about order. In Hell on Earth, that made sense because his humanity was separated from his demon self, and apparently his sense of order came from his human side. But supposedly they were rejoined in the end of Hell on Earth. But it is kind of hinted at that his demon side still took over, so after all that,
technically I can buy what's happening here, but I still don't like it. Pinhead is breaking all of the rules.
Maybe it's because the building is basically a giant lament configuration and the guards walking in is the equivalent of them solving the puzzle. But yeah, they never touch the puzzle box, but Pinhead goes after them anyway. And that kind of sucks, because Pinhead having his own set of rules is what makes him interesting. He is orderly and not chaotic, and therefore not a typical movie monster. I didn't really like the Hellraiser Boom comics, but at least they set up Pinhead as someone who, after nearly a century of the same routines, just becomes bored with it and decides he doesn't want to be a Cenobite anymore. But there are rules that he needs to follow in order to get there, and he follows them.
Again, I didn't like the comic that much, but at least it started off well and it gave us a reason for why Pinhead wants to change things.
Also, the bit with a robot. Remember this scene from Hellraiser 2?
No! It is not hands that call us. It is desire.
Yeah, he leaves Tiffany alone and apparently intends to go after Dr. Channard. What's happening here is that Merchant is doing the same thing that Channard was, only he has the technology to use a robot instead of sacrificing a human. Of course, Pinhead can't go after Merchant because he's trapped, but for the sake of continuity, it seems like the robot should have been left alone. Instead, it looks like it just automatically exploded because it had the puzzle box, and that's not supposed to be how it works.
Then again, Pinhead is breaking all of the rules anyway, so I guess it doesn't matter.
Personality-wise, I don't feel that Pinhead showed too much emotion this time.
Unless maybe I'm just becoming desensitized to it.
Most of the time he just reacts to things with facial expressions and comes across as mostly calm and calculating, as he should. He laughs a couple of times, but they're generally at appropriate times. I think his becoming offended at one of the security guards saying pain is kind of silly.
How dare you use that word?
I actually prefer his laughing at the priest in Hell on Earth saying he'd burn in hell.
It just seems like being offended at a human's lack of understanding in something he holds in high regard is kind of petty.
It seems like he'd be more likely to either laugh it off or calmly show them the way.
But I admit I'm being a little nitpicky there.
Appearance-wise, I'm finally starting to notice some differences. The cuts on his face seem possibly shallower, definitely thinner, which looks okay up close, but from a distance they almost disappear, or at least look more like they're drawn on rather than carved in. And the heads of the nails are curved, which makes them look a bit more decorative and less crude. I'm kind of on the fence about that one, but I'm leaning towards liking it. It adds to his elegance a bit. Those are the only differences I picked up on.
But hey, I only scrutinize Pinhead because I love him so much. If I didn't, I wouldn't care what they did with him.
As always, Doug Bradley does an amazing job, even if he doesn't need to carry this movie as much as he did with the last one. That scene with the dove is one of my favorite visuals from the whole franchise. I love that snarky little, "Do I look like someone who cares what God thinks?" And his "I am pain" speech is the best thing ever.
So I think that's finally all I have to say about Hellraiser Bloodline. I hope I've convinced some of you to give it a chance. Frankly, if you think this is as bad as it gets, I envy you because you have not suffered through all the direct-to-video sequels.
And those are next, because Hellraiser Bloodline was the last Hellraiser movie that got a theatrical release. And there are 5 more, so far.
Honestly, I don't think they're as bad as some people say.
Well, some of them aren't.
Either way, those are going to be next. That's it for now. See you next time. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Here's some other videos you might be interested in. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to further support my channel, there's also Patreon.
Although the boy will not die here, for 1,000 years his dearest wish will be that he had.
If we wanted to live in a state of perpetual agony, we'd let Lister play his guitar.